Okay, the last question on this topic before I just move to two more topics and three, and then I'm done. So, are you able to share with us the current turnover rate of lawyers within CCHR?
We do not have that information today, but we know, I mean, as you can imagine, the majority of our vacancies are agency attorneys, and so, again, we're really trying our best to recruit and retain. And so for recruitment, like, we're really working hard with alumni networks of law schools. We're working and reaching out to a wide range of bar associations, just in our efforts, again, to attract attract agency attorneys and just people in general to our agency.
Okay, on to source of income, which has been a hot button topic. And last year, I know this council, under the leadership of Speaker Adams and, of course, our finance chair, we really pushed to get increased funding to support this unit. Are you able to provide the fiscal 2024 budget for the source of income unit and the actual headcount as of this month? And I do know it's embedded within LEB, and there's like these various discrepancies. So if you could try to share or answer that question, or at least explain the overall headcount for folks who might be working on source of income issues.
Thank you, Councilmember, and you're correct. The source of income unit doesn't have a separate budget. It is embedded into the work that the LEB office does, unit does as a whole. The bulk of the 17 lines, the bulk of those lines will be going into LEB and will be addressing the needs of staff attorneys. I'll turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Salazar to talk about how we have been working with OMB and working internally to identify what that work can look like.
Yep. So for Law Enforcement Bureau, and I know that you understand the complexity of it, but just to give you an idea, so our budgeted headcount for law enforcement is 55. We currently have 43 active employees in LEB. In the source of income unit, we have 10 budgeted lines for SOI, and we have 9 active employees there, so we only have 1 vacancy that, again, we're working very hard to fill. And so the budget for LEB, including OTPS, is about $4.2 million. And again, as the commissioner mentioned, the majority of the positions that are the majority of the 17 lines that we're getting in FY24 will be used for LEB, but to field inquiries, process communications with New Yorkers, and to prosecute, of course, violations of the law. But we also have some of the lines that are going to support other departments that may indirectly support SOI, so that can go for education, outreach, appeals, communications, and marketing.
But I also, before we move on, Councilmember, I also want to recognize that we were here last year and we did not have staff members dedicated to SOI, and that's not true today. Today we have 9 dedicated staff members to work on SOI in our LEB department.
Do you think that the 10, I know you have 9 active, do you think the 10 is enough to fulfill SOI buildup and to address this very prevalent issue?
So while those 10 lines are dedicated for SOI work, as we've mentioned in the past, and I've mentioned in my testimony, LEB as a whole works on SOI work, right? So the SOI work is not limited to the 10 staff members in those lines. Do you want to add anything, Commissioner?
I will just add that in the source of income unit, what we're really proud of is not only the litigation that we do where people come and file complaints. We actually have interventionists who are there to make sure that people who come to us saying that they have been denied a housing opportunity by a broker or by a landlord, we are able to intervene immediately without having to go through the whole litigation process. Litigation always takes time. We're able to intervene right away and able to kind of get them the housing opportunity that they had been denied immediately. So it's a pretty immediate, we try to resolve it within 30 days.
Who's doing the intervention? Is it the attorneys or other staffers?
So we have interventionists who actually are very well-versed in housing vouchers and the whole process of getting units inspected and getting people into housing. But of course, they are supported by the attorneys within the unit and by the supervisors of the unit.
How many, I never knew that you guys had specific people focused on this. So how many interventionists do you have? And is that their official title?
The office title is interventionist, but, you know, there are other titles that are the civil service titles. But we have 4 right now who are interventionists, and then we have 2 people who are working part-time to help them, so.
How many active source of income cases do you have?
I don't remember. 200, I think.
It's,
I think
it,
about 200
I'll get you
plus.
the exact number, but it's around 215.
Okay, and this is really my last question. It's just about the processing, investigation, and determination of complaints. So in fiscal 2022, there were 318 complaints filed and 667 closed. Additionally, the average age of a complaint was 503 days. What is CCHR's goal for the time it takes CCHR to complete an investigation? Why is that the goal? And if you could describe the process of a complaint from an incident to its determination with CCHR. And last but not least, just share with us what parts of this process take the longest.
So when someone comes to us, I'll talk about the individual complaints rather than the commission-initiated first. So when someone comes to us with a complaint, they meet with an attorney who does an in-depth intake. If it is jurisdictional and there is a complaint there that's a violation of our law, or we think that there is, then a complaint is filed. We actually draft the complaint, and the complaint is filed. It's served on the respondent. The respondent then has a chance to answer and submit a position statement. Once that's done, the complainant has a right to rebut after reading the position statement and the answer. So then it's fully submitted. Our investigation then starts. The formal investigation starts. We do interviews of witnesses, of the respondent themselves, of the complainant if we need to talk more to the complainant. We also ask for documents depending on what the investigation is about. Once that's all received, then we go ahead and make a determination as to whether there was discrimination or not. If there was no discrimination, the case gets dismissed. If we determine that there was discrimination, the case, at any point, of course, the case can settle, and they do settle at any point. If we determine there is discrimination, we will issue a probable cause finding, and the case can get referred to oath for a settlement conference, of course, and then trial. So that's the process. After trial, the administrative law judge at oath issues a report and recommendation. That comes back to our commissioner for a decision and order, which is why there's a sort of a wall between the Law Enforcement Bureau and the commissioner, because she's the final adjudicator of that complaint.
Which part of that process takes the longest amount of time?
The investigative process takes the longest.
Okay. And similar to what you said about the source of income cases where you like to have them resolved in 30 days, is there a specific goal that you have in completing investigations or completing the full process? Because the average says 503 days, and I know this is for all of the different cases. So is there a goal, an internal goal, where you say, we need to finish these cases in, 6 months, 3 months, or?
So just to clarify, that the 30 days I was talking about was for the pre-complaint interventions to determine whether it can be resolved in 30 days. If not, we then make a decision whether we need to file a complaint and proceed with litigation, so that we're not having that person sit around for the longest time waiting to get it resolved. I mean, sometimes it goes a little longer than 30 days, but that's our goal, is to have it resolved within 30 days. As for the other cases, I think it's hard to tell. Again, I'm going to say that the cases are, each case is different. It's hard to tell, how long. You can't just have an arbitrary time period for it. It just depends on the complexity of the case, what kind of case it is, who's involved in the cases. All those matter as to how long the case takes to litigate and complete.
Okay, thank you. You know, I appreciate all the work that you do. We do get complaints that the time it takes to process these cases is not due to necessarily the complexity of the case, but due to the lack of resources that your agency has. And I know you have an obligation to present your testimony in a particular way, but I stand very firm that we as a council have increased your mandates. And as you say, it's not necessarily attached to your budget, but it does affect your ability to deliver on such critical services. And so I do hope that you have put your best foot forward here in this budget to make sure you do have the necessary resources and staff to be able to process cases, to be able to proactively test for cases, because these are the complaints we do get from advocates around your ability to robustly address these potential civil and human rights violations. So thank you so much, and I know we'll turn it over to questions from colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. We've also been joined by Council Members Powers, Farias, and Brewer. We're going to start with questions from Council Member Richardson Jordan.
Hi, thank you for being here. Thank you for the work you do. There are two aspects that stood out to me that I wanted to ask about. The first is around the mediation, the volunteer mediation. Could we just hear a bit more about how many folks use that option, that service, and what is the cost in terms of your budget and staffing for the mediation?
Thank you, Councilmember, for your question. There's no cost associated to mediation. It's an office that lives within the office of the chair at the commission, and Commissioner Sabnaraj can speak to the process of what the work is.
Sorry. Thank you, Commissioner. The way it works is that the Law Enforcement Bureau is the one that refers the cases to our mediator, and the requirement is that both the complainant and the respondent is represented. So both of them have to be represented. Then it can be referred to mediation. Once it's referred to mediation, the Law Enforcement Bureau has no idea what's happening with it. If it doesn't get resolved in mediation, it comes back to the Law Enforcement Bureau to then investigate and litigate.
I see. So both parties agree to do it in mediation. And how often does this happen? Do you have a sense of numbers?
Well, our mediation has pretty high numbers in the cases that have been settled. I'm not sure exactly how many cases. It just fluctuates, the number of cases that are referred, because we determine by looking at a case whether it's a good candidate for mediation and whether both parties are willing to mediate. Sometimes we think it's a great case for mediation, and then one party doesn't agree, so it doesn't go to mediation.
Councilmember, I think in my testimony, that was the part that I reached when then I summarized, was in FY23, our Office of Mediation mediated 45 cases.
Okay, great. Thank you. I also just wanted to ask about domestic workers. There's no doubt in my mind that this is a space where attention is needed. I think abuses are happening. We have a lot of Black and brown women. I wanted to ask particularly, you said you address it regardless of size, but are there interventions that exist, particularly for single-family homes with cases of domestic workers? Is it just if they report it to you, or is there any proactive effort or education happening?
So, anyone, right, for domestic workers, it could be one individual in the household, they're covered under the human rights law. Our proactive approach, right, comes in forms of training, the outreach, visibility. We've done, we geared up with a communications campaign before the law went into effect. So we were out, we did partnerships with council members and local community partners. We also partnered up with SBS, right, to make sure that we were in the business corridors, taking the information about the amendments of the law and when it was going to go into effect and how the law was going to protect domestic workers.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Joseph. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just,
Sorry, if I may just add to what Commissioner mentioned.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just,
Sorry, if I may just add to what Commissioner mentioned.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just,
Sorry, if I may just add to what Commissioner mentioned. Outreach strategy. Thank you.
That's excellent.
Rita, go.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner. Good to see you always. I have a few questions. What happened with the specialized unit for gender-based violence and the source of income discrimination restored under the previous commissioner?
So we are always, we don't have a gender-based harassment unit as such, but all our attorneys handle gender-based harassment cases. And I'm sorry, you asked about the source of income?
The source of income discrimination restored under the previous commissioner.
So we do have a source of income unit that handles source of income discrimination, but as the commissioner mentioned, it's not just the source of income unit that's limited to handling source of income cases. If we need other attorneys to handle it, then everyone in the Law Enforcement Bureau handles it.
Council member, I will add that we currently at this moment have 10 dedicated lines within the LEB unit to address source of income. So we have 10 dedicated lines. 9 of them are filled, and we're continuing to seek to fill the 10th line.
Thank you. What are the salary for Attorney 1 positions? Are there any competitive to market for newly graduates?
So for an attorney, I mean, there's different levels of attorneys, but as previously mentioned, the starting salary for an attorney level 1 is about $63,000 if they don't have city experience. If they become an incumbent because they already have city experience, then that incumbent rate is about $72,000. But as we mentioned, we are getting a better pool of candidates for attorney level 2s, and so for attorney level 2s, the starting salary is about $71,000, and if they become an incumbent, it turns into like $82,000.
So have that made it difficult for hiring and retaining senior attorneys? What is the plan to hire competent and knowledgeable attorneys, and how you plan on retaining them?
Sure. So we are actively working with bar associations, alumni networks of law schools in our effort to promote our vacancies to attract the best and most qualified candidates. We are also, as I mentioned, doing professional development internally just to make sure that we're retaining, right? Because we can attract them, but then if they're leaving while someone else is coming in, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? So we're doing, I think, a multi-pronged approach here to recruiting, retaining, and doing everything that we can within our resources to retain and attract attorneys.
And Councilmember, continuing to work right with OMB and the Mayor's Office of Efficiency, we know
To raise the salary.
that this administration is committed to ensuring that we attract talent into the vacancies that we currently have, and so we continue to think through innovative ways to do that.
Attract, retain them as well, and give them living wages. How easy is it for the commissioner to assign more budget towards hiring more senior attorneys?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
Sure. How easy is it for the commissioner to assign more budget towards hiring more senior attorneys? Are you able to assign more money to hire a senior attorney?
So I would say right now we had submitted a proposal to OMB that was a new needs proposal that was funded, and so the bulk of those 17 new lines that CCHR is getting is going to go towards the LEB department for attorneys. And then within our own structure, we have attorney level 3s where we can promote those senior attorneys into those positions.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Councilmember Stevens.
And supervising attorneys.
Hello, good morning. So I just have a few questions. So I was just recently meeting with a group of advocates around disabilities, and one of the things they were advocating for was their own Office of Disability because they feel that this commission doesn't have the right size or capacity to deal with the complaints and issues that they have. So can you talk to me a little bit about like how many staff you have dedicated specifically to folks with disabilities, and what does that look like? Because currently what they were telling me is that the capacity in your office around the complaints that they have, they don't feel like they're being heard, or you don't have the staff to actually adequately address some of the issues.
Thank you, Council Member. I would defer to Deputy Commissioner Raj, but I would add that since my arriving at the commission, one of my, one of the things that I've done is reach out to sibling agencies, and MOPED is one of those agencies that we have been talking to and working through to do joint community events, joint outreach to ensure, right, that there's support from the mayor's office of people with disabilities, and that they support that the work we do as well, and help us highlight that the work that's being done there.
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't think they were saying around the work. I just think that for them, it was the size and the capacity, and just knowing the numbers around the number of New Yorkers with disabilities, that because your agency is so small, that you don't have the adequate staff to actually address the issues of all the New Yorkers with disabilities who feel discriminated against.
So I'm at the Law Enforcement Bureau, we have something called Project Equal Access, which is we have 2 dedicated staff members who actually go out once we get complaints from individuals saying that they have been discriminated against because they're not able to access either housing or public accommodations or employment. They go out and do the actual measurements to make sure that, whether there's a violation or not, whether a ramp can be installed. They're pretty experienced in doing that. So, and then all of our attorneys in the Law Enforcement Bureau, as I said, most of our cases are about reasonable accommodations in housing and in public and in employment. Of course, some of it is because they don't get reasonable accommodations because of a medical issue, but a lot of it is because of physical access, ability to physically access housing especially. And we have a lot of cases, I think, that we have actually dealt with where people have not been able to access their housing. So maybe we can do more. I'm not saying we can't, but I think we do our best to address all the issues that come to us through Project Equal Access, through our attorneys, and also through testing. We do quite a bit of testing of public accommodations and housing to see whether they're accessible or not.
Absolutely. I'm sure you guys are doing your best, and it's a lot, right? And especially thinking about the number of folks in New York City with disabilities. That's why I was asking for the staffing breakdowns, because I think that there's some inadequacies, right? So you can be doing your best, but let's say if you have a caseload of 150 people, your best might not be good enough because that's just not the capacity. So do you have actual numbers of breakdowns of like how many folks you have dedicated to this? Because like I said, when I was meeting with this group of advocates, their complaint was that they feel like you do not have enough staff to address the needs of the New Yorkers. Because there's such a large number. I forgot the number, but it was over like, a couple of thousand that has disabilities, and they don't feel like you guys have enough staff to do the work that you really need to get done. So do you have a staff breakdown of that?
So we don't dedicate staff to just disability cases. The cases are assigned to all of the Law Enforcement Bureau. We don't have a specific disability unit. We have the Project Equal Access, who are not attorneys, who are the ones who are going out and determining whether places are actually accessible. But the attorneys are not dedicated to just disability. Everybody actually gets disability cases. I'll actually have some disability cases that I'm handling, so.
Well, thank you. And Chair, if I could just have one more question.
If I may also just chime in real quick, I know that you asked specifically for the head count. So LEB has 55 budgeted line, and they currently have 43 active employees.
Okay. And just my last question too. And so, if a complaint is put in, what does the follow-up look like? Because that was one of the other issues that they have, that they feel like sometimes they'll put a complaint in, and then now there's further discrimination that goes into that. What does the support and after service look like for anyone who might put in a complaint?
I'm sorry, are you talking about retaliation?
Yeah.
Okay. So retaliation is a violation of our law. It's a separate provision under our law. Disability is something that we try to handle also through pre-complaint interventions. That's one of the issues that we try to handle through pre-complaint. So the person doesn't always have to file a complaint and go through the whole litigation process. If someone calls us and says that they are trapped in their homes, they're not able to access the building because there isn't a ramp or there isn't a lift, then we will try through the pre-complaint intervention process to reach out to the landlord or the owner of the building to say, this person needs a ramp and how can we work towards that. If that doesn't work, the pre-complaint intervention process doesn't work, then we will file a complaint and go through the litigation process. Retaliation is a violation of our law, so that will go towards, higher damages and higher civil penalties if it goes to trial, or even if it settles. That increases everything because you're not allowed to retaliate under any provision of our law.
But what does it look like for the support that happens? Because obviously it's against the law, but so is discriminating, and so people are continuously doing it. And so just thinking about that. But I just want to also say, because I know I have to wrap up and I'll be done. I know you guys are working really hard, and this is a really hard job, and want to say that whatever you guys need, however we can support, we want to do that. But I do think that you should be fighting to get some more staff, especially when there's so many cases, and even a lot of the work that we're doing in council actually is related to what you guys are doing. And so how do we make sure that those things can be accurately implemented?
Thank you, Council Member, and we will continue to ensure that we fill our vacancies as well as ramp up the efforts to fill the 17 lines that we have been that we now are going to have. I would just add to Commissioner Raj, I think in your wanting to know in terms of what kind of follow-up support. Once the cases are settled as part of settlements, some employers, providers, they have to, part of those settlements require, that trainings be done, that the employers or housing providers are reporting back to us to ensure that they do not continue the practices that led to the investigation or complaint in the first place.
Okay, we have Councilmember Barron, followed by Lewis and Abreu.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Commissioner. I wanted to ask a more macro question. First of all, I think you're woefully underfunded. There's 8.6 or 8+ billion people in New York City. There's countless agencies. I would say unscientifically, 99.9% of them discriminate, but that's my opinion, not a fact. So I need you. So with that kind of massive amount of people in New York City, $14 million is an insult to human rights, in my humble opinion. If the mayor wanted to prioritize human rights, because I think racism permeates just about every institution and agency in New York City and America. But the area I want to focus on, two areas. One is contracting. Contracting, and I know you have complaints from the public, but also commission initiations where you can initiate stuff. And I would like for you to look into contracting. Massive discrimination. There's over $21.7 billion in city contracts. That's why Bloomberg became a mayor and didn't accept the salary, because he knew there were billions in contracts. Why would a billionaire want a job that pays $200,000? And when he finished, he started at $5 billion. When he left, he was worth $20 billion. Contracts. And his buddies, particularly white men, got big money, got rich off of the contracts in our agencies. So I noticed you mentioned the MWBEs, and they usually, but you was mentioning that you fund work with them around advertising and things of that nature. But more deeply, they don't get the real contracts. And I'm not talking about subcontracts. I'm talking about the general contract, the big money, the big contracts. usually don't go to black and brown MWBEP. And I have to mention black and brown because now when you say diversity or when you say MWBEs, the W, white women, are now gaining more on that than black people. So I want to be clear, when I talk about contracts, I'm talking about black and brown people who are discriminated against, horribly discriminated against. And I'd like to see an initiative, a serious initiative to looking out how many of the 17,162 contracts that the city contracts with, how many of them are going to white folk, white women and white men, and how many are going to black and brown people, and what amount, and in what areas? This is very important because if we get more contracts, we can do better with the economics in our system. That's the first question. And the second one is on the NYPD. Our human rights are being violated every day by NYPD. Stop and frisk is still happening, they just don't fill out the form. So in my beloved East New York, when they stop these young people, they don't fill out a form and say, I stopped them for nothing, because that's what they would have to say. They don't fill out the form, so it's still happening. And I think that needs to be looked into seriously because we have a human right, a constitutional right, to move about freely in our neighborhood without being disturbed by police.
Thank you, Councilmember. And as you know, and I mentioned before, right, the commission is committed and mandated to look into any tips we receive, any complaints we receive. So as we get those as we receive those tips, those complaints, those calls, we will and investigate them. We like to build our partnerships, right? So individuals like yourself are important for us to continue to do the work and raise awareness that this agency assists, and that if anyone in your community is facing any kind of discrimination, right, that they should be directed to our agency. Do you want to add?
Well, Commissioner, I was talking about the commission initiation, not complaints from my community. I think the commission should initiate an investigation into contracting and to police behavior, not waiting for complaints from people in my community, because quite frankly, a lot of people don't have faith in the system. Yeah, you give them a complaint and nothing happens. With the CCRB, which is why we want an independent investigative a body that is independent from the system. So a lot of people aren't going to complain because they don't have faith in that. I just wanted to know if you can launch a commission-initiated effort in these two areas.
Thank you, Councilmember, and I hear you loud and clear.
Well, I know you hear me, Commissioner, because you have two ears. I'm just wondering whether you'll do it or not, but I hear you.
Councilmember Lewis, followed by Abreu.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners, for being here today. Just two quick questions. This is regarding the federal budget. So this year's budget indicates that the Commission's budget for fiscal year 24, for the Commission's projected budget for fiscal year 24 is entirely funded by city tax levy, while previous years did not include federal funding. So I wanted to know if you could further elaborate and explain the decision to rely solely on city funds for FY24 and the potential implications of this change.
Councilmember, we can get back to you for a specific breakdown. I will have Deputy Commissioner Salazar follow up with the committee and your office in terms of the breakdown of the federal funds.
And let me add to that, since you all will get back to us. I'm also reading information that it's possible for the Commission to swap city funds for federal funds in the next fiscal budget, so FY25. So it would be great to elaborate on what that exchange or that opportunity would be. And just a follow-up question in regards to Chair Williams' question, and I don't think I understood the response. Does the Commission's projected FY24 budget accommodate funds that will support the amount of staff needed to address issues that may arise with domestic workers, particularly our new asylum seekers that are here? So there may be an influx of new cases. Does the current budget and what the breakdown includes staffing and the funding needed for those staffs to address those cases? Thank you.
So yes, I mean, our current budget allows us to handle the influx of cases that we currently have and what we're projecting to get. Of course, as the commissioner has mentioned before, we could do more with more. But we do have 17 new lines that were awarded to us for FY24. So we're looking forward to, with those breakdowns and what that will look like for our agency.
And you're not fully relying on the agencies you mentioned earlier for support services and outreach, because it appears to be a collaborative agency response for domestic workers. So you're not totally relying on those agencies to support with services. It would mainly be from your commission, correct?
So we do work and collaborate with other agencies, but with regards to funding, like it's our budget.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Councilmember Abreu.
Thank you, chairs. Thank you, Commissioner. The issue of human rights in the workplace is a complex one, especially with the rise of remote work. My question, which is a few, is how does the city agency ensure that remote workers are not discriminated against based off of protected classes?
Thank you, Councilmember. Again, we have we're working to increase our visibility. We are continuously using social media to ensure that New Yorkers know that the Commission on Human Rights is there for them. We use print media. We use all our communications outlets to ensure that anyone who's working in New York City, right, who is and lives in New York City is not discriminated against. And so if we receive any tips, any complaints, if we initiate a commission-initiated investigation, we then quickly try to address the harms being done in that area. Do you want to add?
If the work is in New York City, or if the work is supposed to be in New York City, then it's covered by our law.
Yeah, just, given the fact that, employees, previously you would see signs up in the workplace, so it would be easier to communicate this information. What barriers have you faced or in getting this information to people who work remotely, particularly people who aren't on social media, for instance?
So, and any employer, regardless of remote work, doing work with the City of New York has to follow the New York City human rights law. And so, again, right, education is a key tool to ensuring that the law is not being violated. So, days of visibility, right? Increasing our presence in certain communities where we may see a higher use of remote work, but in ensuring that, right, employers as well as employees know what their rights are under the human rights law.
Has CCHR seen any cases of discrimination in remote work?
While we can't really talk about open investigations, I wouldn't say that there has been a flood of cases that have come to us because of remote work.
Got it. What about in closed cases? Any idea? In cases that have already had a final determination?
We don't have any cases that have already had a final determination.
All right. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Sanchez, followed by Brewer.
Thank you so much, chairs, and good afternoon, Commissioner and team. Very, very good to see you. I remember when you were the council member and I was a staffer, and so this is a little bit strange. But Commissioner, I recognize my colleagues have asked about the source of income discrimination unit, but I wanted to start there myself because, one of the most common comments when I go into my office is Pierina or Niña, as they like to call me, can you give me a list of where I can take my voucher and find an apartment? That is how rampant source of income discrimination is in my district. It's not even a thought that you could just go anywhere with your voucher. It is that you will face discrimination necessarily. And so I'm happy to hear that, you've mentioned that 9 staff has been hired since last year. So my first question is, I see that 17 attorneys and specialist lines are being dedicated to the out years. What's going to be the timeline for hiring these lines?
Well, our goal at the commission, council members, is always to hire as quickly as we can. And so, again, we're using all of our tools to try to attract individuals into our agency to ensure that we can staff up as quickly as possible.
Okay, so in an ideal world, if there were, 17 or 17 minus 9 individuals available next year, we can hire them in fiscal 24?
Yes, and so again, recognizing, right, that since my arrival at the agency, there were no dedicated staff to SOI, and that has grown by 9 individuals, and we're happy to have been able to achieve filling those vacancies.
Okay, thank you. And as far as the individual experience, right, that constituent, that person that is facing this discrimination when they're looking for housing, many of those individuals come to council offices, they go to neighborhood nonprofits, and we'll advise them about CCHR and that they can file their complaints, but the vast majority of these individuals probably will not file. So my next question is, what are the different ways that CCHR is tracking source of income discrimination aside from formal complaints?
One of our and I'll then let Deputy Commissioner Raj elaborate on the work that her team does. But I would broadly say, and generally, one of our best tools in our LED department is our testing unit, right? And so again, someone doesn't have to wait to file a complaint or send us a tip, but we proactively do testing around source of income to ensure that landlords are not violating the law.
I'm out of time, so if I can just sneak in one more, it is about the coordination between agencies. So CCHR, HR, and HPD all have different pieces of source of income discrimination work. Can you just describe what the breakdown in activities is across the agencies, how you collaborate?
So we collaborate not just with the agencies. When you were asking how do we know about discrimination, we work with community organizations that work with people who are looking for housing and who have vouchers. So there are different ways we work with Neighbors Together, Unlock NYC, lots of other groups that come to us with issues that their clients have faced with discrimination. We also work with HPD, and our interventionists work with HPD and DSS and the other sister agencies to make sure that people who they're trying to work out interventions for are able to get through some of the issues that they may have to face with other sister agencies, like an inspection or that needs to take place pretty quickly so that people get into housing.
I'm sorry, if I can just clarify, what is the role of each agency?
So HPD does the inspections. I'm sorry, I didn't catch who the other agency you had mentioned was.
DSS.
Oh, DSS. So DSS, we actually don't work that much with DSS anymore because their lines have actually come to us to do the source of income work. But we do work with them when someone's voucher is expiring, and we have to work with DSS to make sure that the voucher doesn't expire. So we are constantly working with our sister agencies to make sure that people are able to get housing opportunities.
Thank you.
So just for a point of clarity, Council Member, we received 6 lines from DSS, and that's how we have been able to, for a source of income work, and that's how we've been able to get those 10 dedicated lines. And so the work now that we do with DSS in terms of collaboration, besides if someone's voucher is expiring, right? If anyone calls DSS or they know of any of their clients that have been discriminated against because of source of income, right? Having a voucher, they immediately call us and direct them to our office.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brewer, followed by Hanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Annabelle. You're just Annabelle to me, sorry.
Yes.
And I'm Gail. So my question is about the ramp complaints. I get a lot, and you mentioned it. So my understanding from the MMR, maybe it was the preliminary, I can't remember, was that there's an 88% increase in complaints, as you heard from Councilmember Stevens, from those who are disabled for accommodations, et cetera. And this is a community that always, and I think legitimately, feels left out. So my question is just on the ramp, do you have some ideas? Because I think these owners don't like putting in ramps. And we always call your agency and you're responsive, but there must be many complaints. Can you give me some idea on that one? How many, how it gets adjudicated, and what happens when the person doesn't want to do it?
So as I said before, Council Member, when the respondent, the landlord, does not want to install a ramp, which does happen, then we will file the complaint, and then they're liable for damages and civil penalties.
Are you successful in getting? I'm more interested in getting the ramp.
Yes. So that's why we have the pre-complaint intervention process. So we first try to get the ramp in by talking to the landlord. To see whether they will work with us to get the ramp in. And then
Can you give us, not necessarily now, some number as to how many complaints you get every year and how they get adjudicated? Not now, but later.
We can get back to you on that, because I'm sure we can pull the numbers on that.
Okay. Source of income, we're all focused on it. I get the same complaints. You know who you maybe talk to, and I want to know in terms of outreach? Brokers. There are brokers who are dealing with this. They love renting apartments. They just love renting apartments because they get money. So my question is, do you meet with the brokers? Because they tell me the source of income, they're afraid to go to the owner and counter the owner. They should be calling you. Mm-hmm. They don't. Do you talk to the brokers?
We do. We actually, the Law Enforcement Bureau and the Community Relations Bureau actually do a lot of trainings for the brokers. We do monthly trainings for the brokers. Sometimes it's part of our settlements where we require the brokers within a larger brokerage to come and do the training at the commission. It's virtual, so it doesn't they don't have to spend time necessarily coming to our commission. So we do that type of training, but also as part of settlements, we do training.
Okay, I'm interested in telling the brokers, damn well, give me your list of owners who are refusing to take the voucher. Do you do that kind of training?
We do that.
That would be my kind of training.
We do that kind of training, and actually as part of our settlements, we do have provisions in settlements where we'll say, you will have to report to us landlords who are refusing to take.
I have been talking to brokers, and they have not been doing that. So I would suggest that could be a stronger part. They have hundreds of cases where these folks are not taking those vouchers. All right, just one last question.
Welcome them to contact us, yes.
Well, I'll try. I think you need to do more outreach to them. What is this? The mayor seems to have a new office for everything. So what's this Office of Equity? What the hell do they do? And how much money do they get?
Office of Equity. What is
Gail, I don't have the budget for the Office of Equity.
What do they do?
The Office of Equity works to ensure, right, again, that there's equitable treatment amongst New Yorkers as a whole, and we do.
Isn't that what you do?
We work closely. We do work closely with them. We enforce the human rights law.
All right, I'll leave it at that. The other question quickly is hybrid. I know that the DC 37 contract hopefully will deal with hybrid. The reason you can't up your number of attorneys is because you're not hybrid. Do you get that complaint? Are you allowed to talk about it?
Our staff is coming in person.
I know, but the reason you can't hire more attorneys is because they can go to any law firm in the city and be hybrid.
We're working, when attorneys come to us and they qualify, we hire them. We've lost some individuals to hybrid, but that has not been why we have not been able to recruit.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilmember Hanks and then Farias for final questions.
Thank you, Chair. I could still say good morning for another 10 minutes. So thank you so much for coming today. I would like to associate my comments with and the questions of Councilmember Abreu and sort of Councilmember Brewer. I've had several complaints and calls to my office regarding perceived unfair and unregulated remote work, the preference of remote work. So it seems that certain employees, higher paid, similarly to attorneys, are given the preference to do remote work, where the lower paid employees are not given that preference. And so even though the questions here is discrimination of, and remote work protections, I think we need to take a look, and I wanted to hear what you had to say as far as how are we ensuring that employees are treated fairly. If there's a remote work policy, that remote work policy is across the board. Is it posted? So for example, I had a constituent call who had a child that was nonverbal autistic, and they were not given the preference to do remote work as opposed to their colleagues that were higher paid, higher titles, that were given the preference for remote work. So if there is a policy of remote work, I know we want to talk about the protections, but we also want to talk about the fairness of how that is dispensed. And so can you talk a little bit about how we, as the council and also as an agency, that we're working to make sure that that the fairness of remote work is taken very seriously? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hanks. In terms of the example you highlighted, that definitely falls under caregiver discrimination, and so
there will be a complaint filed because you also explained that they don't have. I don't think workers know that they can complain to you. I think this is not even something that people are even looking at as a point of discrimination. They just see it, they feel it, and there's no real written law based on who gets it and when do you get it. And so
and then just for a point of clarity, you mentioned policy. When you mention policy, you're talking about specific the private sector, our policy,
so a city worker, right? We're here to talk about remote work discrimination protections. We want to know that people are protected if they are working remotely. What I'm saying is, how do we determine who gets to have remote work as opposed to someone else getting? There is ongoing complaints that I'm getting from my office that certain employees are allowed to have remote work privileges, if you want to call it that, and others aren't. So one, are we looking at policies and procedures to do that? And two, how can we inform workers, city workers, that this is something that they're actually being discriminated against? It's not something that's quite, gelling yet, but it's something that I'm hearing a little bit more often.
So I would definitely speak to our agency. I mean, and we know, right, that the city doesn't have a remote work policy. The city and the administration engage in bargaining unit negotiations, and so there is there should be an outcome from those negotiations. I know our agency, we don't have a remote work policy. We have our our team coming into the office and or into the CSCs. And again, if anyone has felt or is experiencing that they needed an accommodation, right? We have our EO team who will work closely with that individual to address the needs that they're raising.
Thank you. We'll talk more offline because I do have an LS request to do just that. So we'll talk more about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I appreciate your question.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, Commissioner. How are you? Great to see you. I just have a couple quick questions. Are we seeing any increase of, this is around domestic workers and their protections, are we seeing any increase of complaints for the 24-hour work week of domestic workers? And if any of those complaints go through your office and how they've been navigated?
Like I said before, we can't talk about open investigations, but we really have not received a lot of complaints from domestic work in the domestic worker protections. I know that the Community Relations Bureau has reached out quite a bit to community organizations, but that hasn't really resulted in a mass of complaints.
Okay, great. And then I just have two questions around some other items. Have we seen any complaints or issues with the salary range mandate that we implemented last year as the council?
Before we move on to your next question, I just want, for a point of clarity, DWCP is the agency that enforces that law.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And then any complaints around the salary range bill or any issues regarding that?
And so we have not seen any complaints, individual complaints that have been filed, but we've had a lot of tips, 300 plus tips that have come across about the salary range. And we've also done a lot of testing in that area.
Okay, and are the complaints surrounding employers not listing salary ranges for positions or listing too large of salary ranges that don't quite make sense?
The tips are a combination of both.
Okay, great. Do you folks have to annually report out on anything like that, or how can we look at that information?
I've just been handed our annual report, and so I will share it with you. And the
Okay, great. I'll steal that, no problem. And then my last question is how often are you folks having to explain the current state condition of a right-to-work state that we are under for employees? Like when complaints come in, and just depending on what discrimination type it is, does any of that directly is in direct conflict with the fact that we're right to work and people might not understand that?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
I'm wondering the types of discrimination that we see, right? And if many people I find do not quite understand what right to work state means. New York State is a right to work state. How often are we educating folks on the right to work state status and what that means in terms of the type of discrimination they may or may not be experiencing?
So all our, all our education programs are focused on the New York City human rights law. So we talk about, like when the trainings that we do, the community outreach that we do are focused on the employment, housing, public accommodation protections under the law, and that's what we focus on.
Okay, so in that employment education, are we discussing us being a right to work state or not?
That's not part of our law.
Okay.
No, our education is focused on under the human rights law and the 27 protected classes under that.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you. That's it. That's it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take a 2-minute break as we're way behind schedule, and then we'll hear from the Equal Employment Practices Commission. Okay. I think it's still the morning. Not quite. What time is it? Oh, wow. Okay. We're behind, so we got to catch up on time. So good afternoon. Welcome to the second executive budget hearing of the day. We're focused on the Equal Employment Practices Commission. I'm still Justin Brannan, Chair of the Finance Committee, still joined by my colleague, Councilmember Natasha Williams, Chair of the Committee on Civil and Human Rights. Welcome to Executive Director Victor and her team. Thank you all for joining us today to answer our questions. On October 26, 2023, the administration released the Executive Financial Plan for FY23 to 27 with a proposed fiscal 24 budget of $106.7 billion. EEPC's projected FY24 budget of $1.3 million represents less than 1% of the administration's proposed FY24 budget in the executive plan. This represents an increase of $18,000 or 1.4% from the $1.25 million budgeted in the FY24 prelim plan presented back in January. EEPC projects a reduction of just one position since adoption of the FY23 budget last year. My questions will largely focus on EEP's auditing process and the 2022 Racial and Ethnic Classification Report. I now want to turn to my co-chair for this hearing, Councilmember Natasha Williams, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Chair Brennan. I already made my joint opening statement, but as you all know, I really appreciate the work that you do to ensure that there are equal opportunities for New Yorkers that work for our city, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. As I said earlier, your work is so important, and unfortunately, your agency or your commission, as well as CCHR, have historically been underfunded, so look forward to your testimony.
Just, I'm going to turn it over to the committee counsel to swear you in, but just in the interest of time, if you could just summarize your testimony, that would be great, so we could jump right into questions, okay? Mike?
Good afternoon. You raise your right hands, please. Do you affirm that your testimony will be truthful to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, and you will honestly and faithfully answer council member questions? Jean Victor? Russell Ferry? Thank you. You may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Jean Victor. I am the Executive Director of the EEPC, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the work of the EEPC. In a nutshell, the EEPC is one of the smallest agencies in city government. Our approved headcount is 12. We are the only agency, I believe, in the state and in the country that does the kind of work that we do. What we do is we ensure that city agencies have solid EEO programs. We want to make sure that people who are employed by the city, particularly women and people of color, are treated fairly, as well as those that seek employment with the city. We audit 143 agencies over a period of 4 years. We are overseen by a board of commissioners. The thrust of my remarks really go towards the importance of our role, the importance of our job, the things that we do that we try to prevent the risk of lawsuits and claims and settlements that the other city agencies may be faced with because their programs may not be up to par. Our role is to make sure those programs are up to par. And we feel that our importance is not necessarily in how much money we take in for the city, it's what we save the city. And through risk avoidance, I think that our role is one that is, as I said before, extremely important. This year and last year, we've been conducting an audit on the underutilization of women and minorities, particularly people of color, in the city's workforce. We are addressing that issue through our research unit, through Russell Ferry, who's our Director of Research and who's sitting at my right. So our focus as an agency has been on underutilization of women and people of color. We have a very small staff. Our research team consists of 3 people. Our audit team, we have 3 EEO program analysts, 1 manager, and a director. And our, as I said, our total staff is 12. There have been times when we've lost personnel. We are going to lose one next week, who's our IT person. That person is the only person that handles IT for our unit. When he goes, I have to pick up those responsibilities. When we lost our director of research last year in January, I picked up those responsibilities. When the director of human resources left, I had to pick up those responsibilities. There is really no one else to pick up the responsibilities when we lose anyone to, for whatever reason. Which is why we're asking, for additional headcount. We have no redundancies within our office, and right now, if we were to lose somebody, there would be no ability for us to continue to do our job, because that's how small we are at the moment.
Thank you, and thank you for summarizing. Has there been any discussion around something like IT or HR being folded into, a centralized sort of like, do you need your own IT guy?
Well, we actually do need our own IT guy, and I think that historically, when the EEPC was created, I think it shared services with DCAS, because we still share some of those.
I think that's what I meant. Like, why couldn't DCAS handle that sort of back office stuff?
I don't think there's been any discussion around that at this point. And we are a little bit specialized, I have to admit. And our audit unit has its own specialized database. Our research team obviously also has its own database.
Got it. Okay, I just have really 2 questions. I'll turn it over to my co-chair. There's currently 145 agencies within your jurisdiction, right?
Yes.
Okay. That includes the Office of the Mayor, all the mayoral agencies, this body, the City Council. EEPC is required to audit and evaluate the employment practices of all those agencies. What are the main objectives of the auditing process? And how does the EEPC select employers to audit?
So I'll answer your second question first. We audit every one of those agencies on a 4-year rotational basis. So when the 4 years comes around, that's when the audit is conducted for those agencies. The audit itself is based on a series of standards that were created to encompass the laws and best practices around certain areas. There are in excess of 50 standards. We select a focus of what we're going to look at a particular cycle. And this year and last year, our focus has been on underutilization. In prior years, we've looked at sexual harassment. We've looked at HR practices, those kinds of things.
And what type of information or records does EEPC typically request during an audit?
So they request audit, excuse me, I should be saying documents that support the standards that we're looking at a particular time. So for underutilization, we'll request documents that are consistent with the standards around underutilization.
How long are those records kept?
How long are the records kept? By the EEPC? In accordance with their records retention schedule.
And what rights do employees have during the auditing process?
We audit agencies. We don't interact with employees per se.
And what steps could an agency take if they disagree with the findings of an audit?
So there are opportunities for the agency to reply back. So The way the process works is that we will notify the agency that they're being audited. The second step is to let the agency know that these are the documents that we're going to need. Agency submits the documents in a secure environment electronically. We review the documents and make our first findings on whether or not the documents are sufficient or if there are areas where corrective actions need to be taken. Excuse me, at that point, the agency can respond. They have an opportunity to respond. And if they do, we take that into account and we make the changes if that as needed. Then we come out with our final determination. The agency must respond and provide their position on EEPC's findings. And then at that point, we go into a compliance monitoring stage or we finish up the audit.
And the 2022 racial and ethnic classification report, could you summarize the findings of the report?
Well, I'll turn it over to Russell because he's our director of research, and I'll let him be more specific.
So the report that we published in this past year, there were a couple of main findings, and one of them is that the sort of lack of diversity in certain job groups pretty much hasn't been changing much in the past few years. Those that are short on Asians or Hispanics or blacks or women, it's been pretty consistent from year to year. And also in those groups, those job groups and titles that have underutilization, the new people that are being hired are also looking like the people that are already there. So it's, you know, if they're not diverse to begin with, the people that are getting hired look like the people that are already there and therefore are not, it's not really being addressed very well. And then also one other, I think, important finding was that in the past year, and this is probably because of COVID, women have been separating at a rate considerably higher than their current composition in the workforce. We don't have the data yet to dig into why, but you know, there's certain things that we can make a guess about why that might be.
Is the EPC looking to expand the search to more than the 7 job titles?
Yes, so the report that we published this year includes all of them.
Got it.
And we are currently working with DCAS to get more data on the city's workforce so that we can do much more thorough reports in the coming years.
Gotcha. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Natasha Williams. Thank you.
Thank you. The first set of questions are about your strategic plan. So this was for the chair, but he's not here. But if you could share with us, with the experience you have during the time at EEPC, what are you looking to improve at EEPC through the next few years, and what do you see as the largest challenges EEPC is facing?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think that how we see the EEPC moving forward in the next few years would be more of a collaborative agency where you do try to break down silos and work more closely with the agencies. I'd like to go beyond the words of the city charter and go to the spirit of the charter, try to educate the agencies and also take a deeper look at the agency's practices, such as what we're doing along the lines of our pilot program. I'd like to do more audits more frequently and spot check agencies more frequently so that we can make sure that we touch the agencies more often than once every 4 years.
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about your new needs. This plan does not include any new needs from EEPC. Did EEPC request any new needs that were not funded? If so, what were those requests? And did you receive any feedback from OMB regarding those requests that were not funded?
We were not really given the opportunity to submit any new needs. The last few conversations I had with OMB were really centered around the current needs and the PEGs. So we never really had an opportunity to make a request for additional headcount or OTPS funding.
Okay. About staffing, which I know is always a very tough dynamic with your commission. So the fiscal 2024 preliminary budget is $1.27 million. Of that amount, approximately $1.185 million supports personnel services for a total of 12 positions in fiscal 2024, and the remaining very small nominal amount of $87,000 supports other than personnel services. This plan includes the reduction of one position with $50,000 in savings. Has EEPC identified this position? If so, what is the position, and how will the reduction impact EEPC's operations?
Yeah, we just recently lost that position when one of our employees resigned. So, we had requested that we be allowed to maintain that position, but unfortunately, we were not able to. How does it impact our operations? Well, that position actually reported directly to Russell, and that was the position that was going to be managing our pilot program. So, without that position, then Russell has to take on those responsibilities.
Russell, can you just share your existing responsibilities and how that'll increase your workload?
So, as you may know, our primary contribution from a research perspective is based on Local Law 13 from 2019. So that's the report that we were just talking about that we publish annually on underutilization. But we're also engaging in some work right now to set up, new projects in the coming years. One of them is the pilot program that Jean is talking about, where we're going to be doing a deeper dive into city agencies and their work in terms of hiring and diversity and inclusion. So losing that staff person definitely hurts those efforts. It doesn't make them impossible, but it does make it more challenging. And as I had also previously said, that we're working with DCAS to get more data on personnel to do more thorough work. So being short-staffed in that regard makes that more challenging. But again, we can meet our basic requirements. It's just not much more that we can do.
Thank you. So the preliminary plan also included an additional reduction of another position with $90,000 in savings. Can you identify what that position was?
Yeah, we actually lost two positions this year. The first one I told you about, and then we lost another position when we had an internal movement within our office, and we were not, prevented with the ability to backfill that position. That position was on our audit side. It was on the audit team, and that obviously impacts the ability to conduct audits. And right now, with our audit team, there is no member of the team who does audits that has more than 2 years experience. All of our people are relatively new, and some of them doing this work, this audit cycle, for the very first time. So we just, having lost that position on the audit team, we really have no senior people at this time.
What percentage of your work is auditing?
I would say the audit team does 50% of the work. So it's really it's broken down 50-50, 50% audit, 50% research.
Thank you. In an agency of only 14 budgeted headcounts, even 2 reductions equate to a 14% decrease. Do you feel that your budget is sufficiently funded to meet all of your charter requirements?
I would say no. I think right now we're really challenged. We only have an approved headcount of 12. As I said before, we're losing one person next week. We really have no redundancy, and I don't believe that our budget is sufficient to continue to carry out our mandate.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of unfunded mandates, so it's always very alarming when I hear these things. So the charter requires that EPC to audit, evaluate, and monitor the equal employment programs, practices, and procedures of every every city agency and other municipal entities at least once every 4 years. With the recent vacancy reductions, how has the EEPC's audit processes and monitoring of agency compliance been impacted by the current state of hiring?
Yeah, obviously, it's very difficult to continue to audit the agencies the way we've been auditing them. We have, as I said before, new staff, and with the loss of staff, it puts a lot of stress and burden on our existing team.
Yeah, and a few questions are probably going to be redundant, and I typically don't like redundant questions, but you guys know, it really bothers me what is happening at EEPC, and I just want to continue to get on record and reiterate how troubling it is, the vacancies that your commission is facing. So has the EEPC had difficulty meeting the requirement for audits to occur every 4 years?
Well, it's certainly a challenge, and I think the biggest challenge is that as we struggle to keep to our schedule. I know last year we really had to struggle. It was all hands on deck for everyone to participate in order to get the required number of audits completed before December 31st. We are hoping not to face such a burden this year. We're really working hard to make sure we don't, but there are things that happen during the normal course of employment. People go out on leave. People go out on extended leave for medical reasons. I have 2 people out on leave right now. So from our 12 people, we have 2 that are out on medical leave. That leaves us with 10. I'm losing 1 next Friday. That leaves us with 9. And every day it becomes more of a challenge to try to keep up.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about enforcement and non-compliance. So following an audit that finds an entity is not in compliance, the entity has 6 months to change the practices. If after 6 months of compliance monitoring, the EEPC determines the appropriate action has not happened, the EEPC will notify the entity in writing, and the entity will receive a determination of non-compliance and is subject to another audit in less than 4 years. In the 2022 annual report released a couple of months ago, how many entities were non-compliant?
So from a practical perspective, we had 1 entity that was completely non-compliant this year, and last year we were re-auditing another agency because they had not been in compliance.
Okay, is litigation and non-compliance going up in the post-pandemic workforce?
I'm not really sure about that. I would say, if I had to guess or give an educated guess, I would say it's probably been pretty much the same pre-COVID as it is today. We still get some agencies that are not in compliance. I don't know that it's really changed much since COVID.
What are those agencies? Can you name those agencies that are not in compliance?
It's a little bit sensitive because we are trying to get these agencies to get into compliance, and maybe that's something that we can offer to you offline.
Is it in the report?
It will be in the report if it continues to if the agency continues to be non-compliant.
Okay, no problem. The city as a whole pays millions of dollars worth of EEO settlements every year. In a previous statement, EEPC claims that investing in EEO personnel can reduce this. Can you provide a description of how this would occur? Is EEPC able to quantify how much this reduction would be?
So it's very difficult to be able to quantify what the reduction would be. I don't really have access to the numbers, the settlement numbers, as I would have liked to. We're just really focused on the fact that once we feel that the agency is in compliance, we know that the potential for lawsuits and other claims has been greatly reduced.
So my final question is about some of your reports, one of your reports. On January 19, 2022, municipal library staff sent a letter to EEPC requesting for the submission of the report. This due date was December 30th, 2021, but EEPC has yet to submit this. When should we see this report, and why was the report delayed?
I'm sorry, what report are we referring to?
It's supposed to be a municipal library staff report. They requested, I guess, for you to submit, maybe was it your annual report, but you submitted your annual report. Apparently, the library staff sent you a letter about a report, and the report has not yet been submitted.
I'm not really aware of any report that hasn't been submitted. We submitted our annual report, and we did submit two research reports this year. Last year, we also submitted our annual report and our research report, albeit late, but we did get them submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have, first want to shout out PS 376 from Queens, who's joined us today. Good to see you guys. We want to acknowledge we've been joined by Councilmember Salamanca. We now have questions from Brooks Powers, Brewer, and Farias.
Thank you, and thank you for being so candid with us. Really appreciate the transparency and the answers so far. Just for clarity, the IT position that you said you're losing, is that a part of the PEG, or is that separate?
It's separate from.
Okay. What position is being removed as a part of the vacancy redundancy from the PEG that was identified in the executive budget?
So I lost two positions due to cost savings initiatives. One was a backfill for an EEO program analyst, and the other one was a manager of audit.
A manager of
audit.
Audit. Okay. And the commission is required by the city charter to audit every city entity every 4 years. Are there entities in the city that the EEPC does not audit? And if so, why are they?
Yes, there are a number of agencies that we do not audit due to jurisdictional questions. So there are times when an entity will say that they're not subject to an audit by the EEPC, and we will determine whether they are legally, whether legally they should be audited or not, and if there's any question, we send that to the law department. So those are the only reasons why we would not be auditing an entity.
And do you feel like the EEPC should audit those entities?
I wouldn't be willing to abide by whatever the law department says.
And does the EEPC perform work outside of its charter mandates to improve equitable hiring practices in the city?
Well, technically, yes. We have our research unit, and our research unit is charged with implementing Local Law 13. And through those efforts, we look at different agencies to see what actually is happening at those agencies and try to rectify the any kind of inequities at that point.
And then can you provide how much money the city has paid in litigation costs due to equal employment lawsuits? And do you believe the EEPC's activities have prevented litigation against city agencies in recent years?
Well, I can tell you from the comptroller's report that just recently came out, there was a statement there that said that there was 143.2 million dollars worth of claims that related to EEO. I really can't tell you how much of that was based on the protected categories, because they also included civil rights violations by law enforcement personnel in that number. But obviously there are claims that relate to EEO in there, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Round two, if I could ask another set.
No round two. Go ahead.
Okay, it was just one last one anyway. So can EEPC detail its efforts to educate city agencies on equal employment opportunity and which city agencies you work most closely with?
Right, we do a couple of things. Last year we held a symposium and we invited all the city agencies, their EEO officers, their HR officers, and their agency heads. We had a guest speaker from New York University to talk about HR practices and how to identify glass ceilings and to address underutilization of women and people of color in city government. In addition to that, we formed an employment advisory council to try to break down silos within city government and to kind of work with other entities within city government. A part of the council would be like DCAS, it would be the law department, OLR, any other agency that kind of deals with EEO, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that council is growing, that committee is growing, and will be growing this year as well.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you very much. You have a great chair, Alden Bonilla, just to shout him out. One question I have is just picking up on previous questions about saving money. So if the claims, according to the controls, 143.2 million, obviously you don't know how much is in the protected category. Do you have any sense of what it has been in the past? Is this a large number, smaller number? Do you have any sense? Because we're all saying to agencies, and I hope that the OMB is saying the same, when you save the money, save the city money, then you should be getting the staff to be able to do that. Otherwise, it's penny wise and pound foolish. So I'm just wondering if you have, some sense of that in the past.
Unfortunately, I don't. When I came on and took this role 2 years ago, I did ask to see if we can find out that number, but we were not able to get that number.
Okay, so maybe we could ask others to try to get you that number, because it does seem to me that that's what you're doing. You're saving the city money.
Yes.
The second question I have is hybrid. So how are you handling with your audits? I know the mayor has said no hybrid. I've been arguing for hybrid, and I'm waiting for the DC 37 contract, et cetera. So how are you handling that issue? If you find, I assume some agencies are doing hybrid even though they're not supposed to, because otherwise you can't keep an agency whole in terms of their staffing. So how are you handling the hybrid issue? I'm supportive of it, not because I think it's what people should be doing, but I want staff. And if you can find an agency elsewhere, a job elsewhere, where I can be working at home 1 or 2 days a week, I'm going to go there. I want city employees to be the best, and I want them here. So how are you handling the hybrid issue?
It has not really impacted the work that we do. A lot of our work is done on computer, electronically, and we've been very successful in getting that done. So it has not been a problem.
But do you find agencies wanting to do that, or they don't discuss it in terms of HR or anything? It doesn't come up at all?
It doesn't really come up at all.
Okay. And then my final question is, what is, we're all wondering what's the caseload? Obviously, you have a slightly different situation. You're not the Commission on Human Rights with caseloads. But how given your very challenged staffing, how is the caseload? In other words, how many audits can you complete? You know what I'm trying to say. How many audits? How does that change? Blah, blah, blah.
So we average about 43, 45 audits per year. And we divide those in, amongst our EEO program analysts, who are our staff members who do the audits. Right now we have 3 people that are doing that. Obviously, when we have new people, we can't give them as much because that would be unfair. So the people that have been here the longest, which is like 2 years, they get the bulk of it.
Okay, and how long does it take to do, I don't know, like a DSS agency versus perhaps, Commission on Human Rights, very different in staffing?
Right, it's a lot of paper to go through. It takes a couple of months to go through everything and work with the agencies so that we can get to a final determination.
It's about a couple of months is what you're saying?
At least.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have final questions from Councilmember Farias.
I will be quick. Hi, thank you folks for coming and testifying. You mentioned you lost 2 positions from cuts, and it sounds like you agree that your headcount reductions and limited budget is not enough. What has been the admin's response to this from you folks? Have you folks expressed that you really can't take on any more reductions and can't lose any more personnel?
Yes, we've expressed it many times, but unfortunately, it was not changed.
Okay, and is there any appetite, not from yourselves, but from the admin, for improving retention, increasing salaries, anything like that for the titles that we have here that we want to maintain?
That's a good question. I'm not sure of where we stand with it. I did request an increase in salary for one of my personnel to retain that person. I've gotten no response. And that's been for a little bit of a time. It's been a couple of months. So, so essentially, what I would say is that there hasn't really been a lot of interaction on any kinds of initiatives to really retain personnel at this point.
Got it, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like to me the admin is not really interested in retention and streamlining these agencies and ensuring services are not going to be impacted by the vacancy reductions and the pegs that are called, but I appreciate you answering my questions.
Thank you. Good. Councilmember Williams.
Yep, just one final thing before we close out. I know you mentioned that you weren't given the opportunity by OMB to submit for any new needs and really just talked about your existing needs. So I want to give you the opportunity to talk about any new needs that you have, what your ideal budget would be, your head count and total amount for both personnel services and OTPS.
Thank you, Chair Williams. I think ideally, right now, as I said, we have 12. I think ideally we should have around 17, so that would be an additional 5 headcount. Those headcount would be distributed between audit and research to help us to accomplish our mandate under the charter and Local Law 13. We have lots of planned activities, lots of things that we'd like to do. For instance, we'd like to look at other kinds of research studies so that we can make recommendations to the city. We would like to do conferences, symposiums to educate the city community. Also, we're starting a pilot program to take a deeper look into agencies' practices and how they address underutilization. What we'd like to do is use the pilot program to inform our recommendations so that when we make recommendations to City Council, they are meaningful and valuable. We'd also like to kind of break down some silos and work with other agencies and create continuity between EEO officers so that when we conduct an audit, we've experienced that some of the agencies are not prepared because they don't have an EEO officer or their EEO officer has left and moved on to other agencies, or the EEO officer is new to the agency and they don't know where any documents are. We'd like to, create a document so that whatever agency you're in, the EEO files, documents, all look the same and people know where they are, know where they can find them, know what they have to do, know what the process is. So, and that would help us immensely in conducting the audit, and I think that would help the agencies in maintaining compliance. Yes.
If there's one thing that I could also add, data. So just to give a concrete example, I know that there was a proposal to require the city to do exit interviews, and I don't know where that's gone. To make that data publicly available so that we could access the survey results and do analyses of that to get to these questions about remote work shouldn't cost the city any money, but would allow us to do some really great things.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for what you do with such limited resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll hear from CUNY. Thank you, EEPC. Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the final executive budget hearing for today, focused on the City University of New York. I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague, Councilmember Eric Dinowitz, Chair of the Committee on Higher Education. We've been joined, in addition to folks who've been here from this morning, we've been joined by Council Members Hudson, Feliz, Krishnan, and Schulman. I want to welcome the Chancellor and his team today. Thank you all for joining us to answer our questions. On April 26, 2023, the administration released the Executive Financial Plan for FY23 to 27 with a proposed FY24 budget of $106.7 billion. CUNY's projected fiscal 24 budget of $1.3 billion represents 1.2% of the administration's proposed FY24 budget in the executive plan. This represents an increase of $18 million or 1.4% from the $1.28 billion budgeted in the admin's FY24 prelim. The net increase comes predominantly from $11.6 million added to cover new needs. CUNY's projections also show a decrease in headcount of 235 positions since the adopted fiscal 23 budget, primarily from the elimination of vacancies through the administration's PEG, the program to eliminate the gap. I think we all agree CUNY has made higher education accessible to New Yorkers of all backgrounds and has been a true stepping stone for economic prosperity, and this council believes that now is the time to double down on our investments to CUNY and not the opposite. My questions today will largely focus on the impact of federal funding changes, labor agreements with PSC, CUNY Reconnect, and the impact of the PEG reductions on the CUNY community colleges. I now want to turn to my co-chair for this hearing, Chair of the Committee on Higher Education, Councilmember Eric Dinowitz.
Thank you, Chair Brannon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fiscal 2024 executive budget hearing for the Committee on Higher Education. I'm Eric Dinowitz, council member and chair of this committee, Higher Education, and also a proud CUNY alum. I'm pleased to be joined by my fellow council members, Stevens, Brewer, Lewis, Schulman, Krishnan, Feliz, Sanchez, and Barron. I think I missed, and Hanks. Today we will hear on the fiscal 2024 executive budget, the fiscal 23 to 27 executive capital commitment plan, and the fiscal 24 to 33 capital strategy for the City University of New York. $1 billion is 1.2% of the city's proposed fiscal 2024 budget in the executive plan. The fiscal 2024 budget is $150 million, or 10.4% less than the fiscal 2023 budget at adoption. CUNY's fiscal 2024 budget increased by $18 million, or 1.4%, from the $1.28 billion budgeted in the fiscal 2024 preliminary financial plan presented in January. The increase is the result of a number of actions taken, most significant of which is $11.6 million for agency needs. In the City Council's fiscal 2024 preliminary budget response, the Council identified several areas related to safeguarding the education and learning opportunities for New Yorkers. I'm very happy to see that the executive plan includes an additional $5.8 million for CUNY Reconnect to support programmatic services and to help with the expansion of the program. However, I'm disappointed that funding for this very important program that recruits and supports former CUNY students who interrupted their studies, providing them with an opportunity to complete, develop, and expand their academic and professional goals, was not baselined. In the budget response, the Council sought the restoration of cuts made to CUNY in prior financial plan, as well as seeking certain investments in CUNY programs. Of the $36.9 million requested for various programs, only $1 million was restored for the Brooklyn Recovery Corps at Medgar Evers College for fiscal 2024 only. CUNY's budgeted headcount for fiscal 2024 is 6,024 in the executive plan. This is a decrease of 235 positions compared to the headcount budgeted at fiscal 2023 adoption. How does this reduction impact programs and students served in fiscal 2024 throughout the campuses. CUNY's commitments for fiscal 2023 through 2027, as presented in the fiscal 2024 capital commitment plan, total $699.5 million, 70% greater than the total for the same period presented in the preliminary capital commitment plan released in January. $269.7 million of new capital commitments were added in the executive budget for the redevelopment of the Brookdale campus. Can you provide us with an update on funding that will be used for upgrades and improvements? CUNY's 10-year strategy totals $1.5 billion, and unlike many other city agencies, is well balanced across the plan, other than a large spike in planned commitments in fiscals 2027 and 2028, when a majority of the funding for the construction of the Brookdale campus is planned. This strategy explains the connection between capital investment and strategic priorities. It is the Council's responsibility to ensure that the city's budget is fair, transparent, and accountable to New Yorkers. This includes equity in funding and assistance. As chair of the Committee on Higher Education, I will continue to push for accountability and accuracy and ensure that the budget reflects the needs and interests of the city. This hearing is a vital part of this process, and I expect that CUNY will be responsive to the questions and concerns of council members. I look forward to an active engagement with the administration over the next month to ensure the fiscal 2024 adopted budget meets the goals the council has set up. And I would like to thank the Chancellor and everyone from CUNY for coming and for testifying today. I would also like to thank my staff and the staff of the Finance Division for their help in preparing for this hearing. Thank you.
Okay, Chancellor, now we're going to swear you in. If I see your testimony is quite long, if you can summarize, that'd be great, so we can dive in. Counsel?
Thank you. Please raise your right hands. Do you affirm that your testimony will be truthful to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, and you will honestly and faithfully answer councilmember questions? Chancellor Rodriguez? Vice Chancellor Batista?
I do.
Vice Chancellor Chiappa? Provost Hensel? Thank you. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Brennan, Chair Dinowitz, and members of the New York City Council Committees on Finance and Higher Education, staff, and guests. I'm Felix Matos Rodriguez, Chancellor of the City University of New York. I am joined this afternoon by University Provost Wendy Hensel, Chief Operating Officer Hector Batista, and the Chief Financial Officer Cristina Chiappa. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. In my 4 years serving as CUNY's Chancellor, I've had the privilege of assembling a talented executive cabinet and roster of college presidents of unprecedented diversity who reflect the city we live in and the students we serve. On behalf of the entire CUNY community, I want to thank Mayor Eric Adams and the entire City Council for your sustained and steadfast support. I want to turn briefly now to the recently finalized state budget, and we're very thankful to Governor Hochul and the State Senate and Assembly for significant investments in CUNY that will help us advance academic success and career opportunity programs. The university received $132.8 million in new operating appropriations, of which $50 million is a one-time transformational funds that can be used by both four-year and community colleges, and more than $1 billion for infrastructure funding. The state budget was supportive of our community colleges that have been financially struggling due to declining revenues driven by enrollment and by city pegs. The university fiscal 24 state budget request asked to retain a funding floor for budget stability, and we are appreciative that the state enacted budget includes a 100% funding floor against the fiscal year 22 level. Before addressing the specific proposals in the city's executive budget, I want to address budget cuts caused by the program to eliminate the gap, PEG. The university started this fiscal year with a $20.6 million baseline PEG. Throughout the financial plans issued since that time, that PEG has now grown to $39 million for fiscal year 2023 and $61.2 million for fiscal year 24 baseline. The PEGs, along with the decrease in tuition revenues, have had a significant impact on our community colleges' operations, student services, and programs. We have been able to manage some of the PEGs' impact with federal stimulus funding received due to the pandemic. That funding, as you know, is not recurring. Let me share how PEGs have impacted two significant CUNY-wide programs. One example relates to CUNY's ASAP. ASAP has garnered national attention and has been replicated at 11 institutions across 6 states. Because of the PEGs, CUNY has reduced the ASAP budget by $13 million, leading to a reduced annual enrollment from 25,000 students to 20,000 students. That means 5,000 fewer community college students who receive $1,800 in annual financial support for tuition, subway fares, and textbooks, and thus will take longer to graduate or might drop out. This will also impact the enrollment of our four-year colleges because there will be less students transferring to those campuses. That is not only a tragedy for those students, but a huge loss of talent for the city and our state. The CUNY Tutor Corps is another program, their budget which has been cut by $4.1 million. The program brings current CUNY students who are studying math, computer science, and education into public middle and high schools to provide tutoring and support classroom teachers. Tutor Corps previously reached 28,000 New York City public school students with placing 275 tutors. With the cuts now, the program is down to 80 tutors and serving just 8,000 students. Here are some other examples of how the PEGs and enrollment revenue losses have already affected our community colleges. The impact could greatly increase in fiscal year 24 and beyond. First, reductions in staff within the academic advisement, transfer, and counseling centers and financial aid offices limit students' access to vital resources necessary to navigate and complete degree requirements in a timely manner. Information technology staff vacancies impact the time and ability to meet IT needs of the colleges, including having the proper equipment, maintaining such equipment and connectivity, and solving problems that relate to all IT facets of the campus. Reductions in library staff could result in reduced service hours. Campus libraries provide students with on-site access to resources and information while providing a distraction-free environment to study. Staff reductions to maintenance and campus operations can impede the quality of care given to the campus and make it harder to ensure that our campuses are kept safe, clean, and well-maintained, and will increase future maintenance costs and liabilities. Now let me turn to some specific provisions of the city's executive budget proposal. We are grateful that there is $5.8 million for the CUNY Reconnect program, which re-engaged almost 17,000 New Yorkers who began college but stopped out before they complete a degree. The initiative was the brainchild of and advocated by the New York City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams, and we thank her for her leadership and her vision. We ask that CUNY Reconnect be baseline given its importance and success. We're also pleased that the executive budget baseline $4.8 million for the CUNY Inclusive Economy Initiative, which aims to connect 100% of CUNY graduates to careers and advanced degrees by the end of the decade. Provides funding for the Brooklyn Recovery Corps at Medgar Evers College, a paid internship program at Brooklyn-based small businesses and nonprofit organizations, and includes mandatory cost funding for collective bargaining, fringe benefits, energy, and building rentals. One program not included in the executive budget is ACE. This represents a $9.1 million reduction. All ACE students receive comprehensive supports that have been found to significantly increase timely graduation rates. We received yearly funding over the last 3 years and expanded the program to serve 2,800 students. If the city fails to provide these funds, we will have to reduce annual program enrollment by 1,750 students who currently benefit from $2,800 in annual support for tuition, subway fares, and textbooks. Additionally, the executive budget did not include $1 million in city STEMs waivers. We ask that the funding for the ACE and the city STEM waivers is included in the city's fiscal year 24 budget. This would allow for the continuation of these programs that are so beneficial to student completion. Additionally, the executive budget does not include funding for over $30 million in funds provided by the council in fiscal year 23, including funding for the Valon scholarships, Citizenship Now, research institutes, development, educational programs, and the CUNY Diversity Incubator, which will become the CUNY Anti-Hate Initiative. We're asking the council to restore all and enhance a few of these items. Now let me briefly turn to the capital budget. The city's executive budget proposes $1.749 billion in capital funds for CUNY over a period of 10 years. The budget includes historic funding of $479.9 million for the Spark Kips Bay Brookdale initiative and $10.2 million in new funding from the city's borough presidents. Included in the city 5-year capital plan are 5 new highly priority projects that are part of the concerted effort to expedite our capital renewal work. They are HVAC upgrades at 7 buildings at Bronx Community College, $80 million, piping and distribution upgrades at Kingsborough Community College, $20 million, a fire alarm project at the Borough of Manhattan Community College for $12 million, a seawall exterior lighting at Kingsborough Community College at $2.4 million, and a boiler at Queensborough Community College at $1.5 million. Thanks to the city and state's past support, we have already completed 184 projects, allowing us to increase our completion rate by approximately 10%. And currently, we have over 340 active projects throughout the 5 boroughs with an estimated budget that remains in construction value of about $1.5 billion. The university is also focusing its efforts on climate change, sustainability, and energy conservation targets. As so many of you recognize, CUNY is an essential component to recovering and rebuilding our communities, especially those that were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Our internal analysis shows each dollar invested in CUNY returns a benefit of at least $15 to New York's long-term economic prospects. Conversely, each dollar disinvested reduces our economic potential by $15. In other words, a $60 million budget reduction to CUNY would reduce our city and state's economic potential by $900 million in present value. Normally, I will end my testimony sharing with you something I believe in my core, that while CUNY faces a number of challenges, I'm extremely optimistic about the future of our great university. Today, I have to add a caveat, given my profound concern regarding the impact of the PEGs to the availability of services, staffing, and support at our community colleges. The PEGs also come at a time where our students and our future students are starting to recover from interrupted learning and navigating additional mental and socioeconomic challenges due to the pandemic. Your investment in and support of CUNY builds a stronger, more vibrant New York, one that is inclusive and benefits all New Yorkers regardless of race, socioeconomic status, or immigrant status. I am proud, as I know you are, of the CUNY community and certain of our integral and indispensable role in the lifeblood of New York City. With the sustained support of our New York State and city partners, the future of this great university will continue to be bright. This concludes my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions that the chairs and the members might have. And if I can take one point of privilege, I would like just to acknowledge some rumors that I've heard that a longstanding friend of this council, a longstanding member of CUNY, this might be his last budget hearing. John Katowski has served the university with great distinction and honor. There's some rumors this could be his last budget hearing, and I want to acknowledge his great service to CUNY, to the city of New York, and the great friendship that we all have with him, and I wanted to acknowledge that to begin the hearing today. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you to you and your team. Let's just jump right into it because I know we'll have a lot of questions. There was a reduction of $76 million in federal funding in the FY24 executive plan compared to the adopted budget for FY23. How will the loss of those federal funds impact CUNY, and particularly, how does it impact the community colleges?
Let me let the CFO, Christina Chiappa, take a stab at that.
Thank you. So as the Chancellor mentioned, the federal funds have been incredibly helpful to CUNY since the pandemic, and they've really been helping us backfill losses of both PEGs and tuition revenue. So clearly with that funding coming to the end, that combining with the tuition losses, we're down about 35% in tuition plus the PEGs, that really exacerbates the financial challenges that we have.
The FY24 executive budget, there was a decrease of $21.6 million to personal services when compared with the FY23 adopted budget. Does this impact headcount, and if so, by how much?
Yeah, so those represent the various PEG increases that have occurred during the year. The last one with fringe plus 2 other PEGs equal that amount. And of course, there is headcounts behind those. I think the headcount was 235 in total.
235 lost because of the PEGs?
Lost or will be lost, right? Some of that relates just to 24. I'm sorry, so 211 is the total amount of the PEGs.
211
Yeah,
headcount lost because of the PEGs?
yeah.
And are there programs that will be, I assume, be impacted by the reduction to the personal services budget?
Yes, yeah, I mean, over 85% of our budget, even the programmatic budget, is people. So the numbers I just quoted, 211, we've clearly lost more over the pandemic, again, because of the losses of tuition revenue plus the PEGs.
There was a decrease of $128 million in OTPS in FY24 compared to last year. What's included in the reductions for OTPS?
So the 77 million you just mentioned of federal funds is part of that, and also a couple of things that Chancellor just spoke about. So it's not continuing the funding for things like ACE, the City Council initiatives. So we could give you a list, but if you add those up, that's what adds up to that number you quoted.
I mean, do you have a list or a summary of
I have some of them right
which programs would be impacted?
Yep, I have some of that information. Just give me one
Sure,
second. So the 128, it's $77 million in the federal, and then it's $45.9 million in program funding. 15.8 million is the loan. ACE is 6.8. The CHAMPS program at Medgar Evers, which really is ACE, is 2.3. Other city funded program initiatives, 7.6. Citizenship Now, 3. Gateway Course Success Initiative is 2. Food insecurity is 1. And then also part of our PEGs of $5.1 million was through the OTPS. So the total of those equal that 128.
Got it. What's the status of contract negotiations with PSC?
Well, thank you for your question. We had our labor management meeting 2 weeks ago with the PSC, and we agreed to set some dates moving forward so we can begin our negotiations. I'm very proud that when I became chancellor, the negotiations with the PSC have been stalled for 2 years, and in a couple of months, we negotiated a 5-year contract, which brought substantial benefit to the members, particularly to the adjuncts. So we look forward to engaging with the PSC soon and hopefully be able to get a contract as soon as we can.
Great. My last question is something that's personally important to the speaker and to this council is the CUNY Reconnect program. Received a restoration increase of funds in the executive plan, the FY24 executive plan. Could you explain why this program, as well as the Brooklyn Recovery Corps at Medgar Evers, was not baselined?
Well, I mean, we don't get to decide which program gets baseline, right? So you might have a better answer than I do for that. We just think that the CUNY Reconnect, we commend the speaker for her vision. Well, the first thing she said at that ABNY speech, we have planned to do 10,000 students. We are 17,000, and we began not with a full year of work. So we intend to do more. The other part that we want to do is we want to retain those students, right? It's not just bringing new students back. We want to make sure that they stay. So the additional funding there would allow us to continue to build on what we have created, additional college navigators, additional support for students. Some funding, for example, is going this year into the summer programs. Now that the vaccine mandate has been lifted, we have data that probably more than 10,000 students, started register for the class, and when we asked for the vaccine verification, dropped out. So we have incredible capacity, and CUNY Reconnect is going to be a formidable tool to be able to do that moving forward.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to my co-chair and my colleagues.
Thank you, Chair Brennan. I just want to quickly turn it over to Councilmember Krishnan for a question.
Thank you so much, Chairs Brannon and Dinowitz. Thank you, Chancellor, for your testimony. I just have one question. I think what concerns me, what concerns its council very much too, are the size of the multiple pegs to CUNY. And I want to be clear. I know City Hall has made an issue of saying that there's been a restoration to CUNY, but the record needs to reflect that there are still earlier cuts and pegs to CUNY as well. And so even whatever partial restoration there may be, there are deeply concerning reductions to CUNY. My question to you is, given us recovering and emerging from this pandemic, given the number of students across the city, and especially in communities of color that CUNY serves as well, the number of programs that you testified to just now, can you testify as to what the impact of these pegs will be for the long term? Because my understanding is, at this very delicate moment in our city's recovery for our education system, pegs like these are not only going to impact the present situation, but can also set back the institution for the long term as well. And I'd love to hear your testimony on that point.
So thank you, Council Member. You couldn't have said it better. We believe that we are at an inflection point. We're coming out of the pandemic. We're beginning to see, the numbers are preliminary, but increasing number of students coming back for summer sessions. The numbers for the fall begin to look better now. We seem to be in that recovery mode, but we're still in a fragile moment. Many of our students suffer, learning disruption at CUNY. Some of the students that are going to be coming over from the Department of Education also are coming from that, so we need additional resources to be able to make them, catch up to speed in terms of their academic readiness. CUNY Reconnect has also shown us how additional touching and reaching out and connecting with the students is indispensable to bring them back. We're building a lot of momentum and learning from what we're doing in that initiative to reshape our strategies. With the leadership here of Provost Hensel, CUNY Online is going to be also reaching out to a whole number of New Yorkers that might have been looking for online program opportunities outside from the state. So we have a lot of momentum going on. We're still at a fragile moment, and the pegs hurt the campuses that have been hurt the most, which is the community colleges, right? So we feel that the timing for that is incorrect, and we want to be able to restore all that funding so that we can put all cylinders at the service of our most disadvantaged New Yorkers at this critical time in the economy of New York.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Krishnan. Councilmember Schulman.
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback on my colleague. So first I want to say that I am somebody who was a CUNY student, and my mother is a CUNY graduate. So CUNY is very important not only to the success of the city, but to its future. So CUNY has absorbed years of program cuts while also trying to recuperate from enrollment declines. Yet CUNY has managed to maintain a level of success with programs like CUNY, ASSEP, CUNY, Reconnect, and others. Is there a concern for how much is being lost in terms of returns to the city? For every dollar that CUNY spends on a student brings back $15 to the state. How can we justify these cuts when we're actually taking money away from the city?
I mean, we believe that this is one of the soundest investments that the city can make. We have proved it time and time again in terms of the return on investment on the students. If you think about the crucial role that our campuses play as anchor institutions in each of the boroughs, providing cultural life, activities, support to the New York City public school system for additional programming. I mean, the impact is really, really wide. citywide. And so I think that we are part of the solution of how we fully recover and how we recover in a much more equitable way. We saw how the pandemic also hit some of the groups that were more disadvantaged the most, and we believe that we're part of the recipe of sort of building the city back with the right investments in CUNY.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Schulman. I want to talk a little more about the specific programs. It's a $61.2 million cut with the PEGs, correct? And so that's really impacting all programs. So I just want to touch on a few of the programs that you mentioned. For instance, CUNY Tutor Corps is going to be cut by $4.1 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then I just want to, you said 28,000 students to 8,000 students. And so can you describe a little more what that means for the CUNY students and for our Department of Education K-12 students?
So it is unfortunate because I can tell you that I think at no time in the history of the city, the partnership between the New York City Public Schools and CUNY has been stronger. We've been really working very hard, both teams, on the career side, on the curriculum side, on the enrollment side. And this is an example of a program that was a winner for all. It was a winner for the high school students, right, that got a mentor and persisted and had someone they can look on, and it would allow them to fight the summer melt and come and support. It was a support for the teachers, which you know, as from your experience.
I would have loved a CUNY Tutor Corps student in my classroom.
All the support, but also think about the pride in that CUNY student who's serving as a mentor to those students, right? The self-esteem, how that helps you to remain focused in school. You're making extra money. You know how much I believe in paid internships, right? This is a version of that. So this is one program that is a win for our students, for our future students, for the teachers, and we think it's the right investment to make.
And the PEG is essentially gutting that program. You said with ASAP there are 5,000 fewer students. Can you talk a little more? You mentioned the $1,800 in cash assistance, but there's more to the ASAP program than cash assistance. Can you speak briefly on what the students are going to be losing with this PEG?
Well, I mean, first, there's going to be less students, right? So those students would lose participating in the program completely. So the Metro card, the access to a specialized advisor, the capacity to log in and get into the classes and register early. A number of the things that have proven why ASAP is really, really effective. Additional funding to be able to take summer classes and winter classes to keep momentum. All those things will disappear, right? So either you will not continue, or you will take longer to graduate, wasting your time and your funding and your TAP dollars or your financial aid. And it's a double hit on us because those students who will be transferred more quickly are not going to be attending our four-year schools too, right? So it's a loss for those students, and it's a loss for the entire system in terms of this human talent of our students.
And how much, the ASAP program specifically, how much money does that save? Investment in that program?
I mean, I can get you, we have some return on investment. I can get you that number in a second. But I mean, what you invest up front in the student, you save in the speed of the graduation rate. $6,000 per graduate.
So this PEG is going to result in spending $6,000 more essentially per graduate. This PEG is going to cost money. Despite the goal of saving money, it's going to cost money. I just want to be clear on that. Not to mention the future of a student who may not graduate in as timely a fashion or may not graduate at all.
Yep.
Okay. And I assume it's similar for the ACE program, which is that program for our four-year colleges?
Yeah, the ACE is smaller because we have it just in a number of the schools, but if the cut of 9.1 is enacted, we're going to have to actually tell 1,750 students who are currently in the program, we're going to have to say, you cannot be in the program anymore.
Students who got into CUNY with the understanding that they would...
Who received all those additional support, yes.
And it's going to be yanked from them.
Yep.
So they're going to lose the program because of the PEG, and it's going to end up costing the city more money in the long run.
Yeah.
That's correct?
And I didn't mention in my testimony too, ACE got started similar to ASAP with generous funding from some private foundations, right, who've been supporting our experimentation in this arena. If they see a lack of public investment and interest, they might also decide not to continue to invest there too.
So losing private funds as well?
Yep.
Okay. I want to turn it over to a few colleagues who said they have questions. We'll start with Councilmember Barron.
CUNY, I've been a supporter for CUNY for decades, and the core support we need from CUNY is the students. I think the students of CUNY deserve you to commit to no tuition increase and for us to commit to a public funding increase. See, this is an annual budget dance that happens in the city council. They're going to cut stuff. We probably will restore it at the end, but I want to take that for granted because no telling what could happen around here. We probably will restore it, but we don't need just restorations. We need enhancements. See, and that's the game they play. You fight so hard just to restore the cuts when in fact we need enhancements. So I wanted to tell my colleagues, the bad news is the mayor wants to cut CUNY. The good news is he doesn't have a vote on the budget. The city council passes the budget, not the mayor. So the same questions they're asking you about PEGs, we should all make a commitment to not vote for a budget that has these kind of PEGs for CUNY. That's number one. Number two, the Black Male Initiative on CUNY. Years ago when I was chair, we had it baselined. I believe it's still baselined in the mayor's budget. So just wanted to know a report on how that's doing, and the Black Male Initiative funding, I also think, needs to be increased. And then child care at CUNY has been a major issue, child care at CUNY, and also transportation. Textbooks are ridiculous. The price of textbooks. We had a hearing one time where they was going into rentals and other kinds of options for textbooks, because you know, under this capitalist system, textbooks is a multi-billion-dollar profit industry. So they change one paragraph and tell you that's the old edition, when it's just one paragraph changed, forcing students to buy the same book with a new paragraph so they can make more money. So I'm concerned about textbooks as well. And finally, the black faculty. You know, you have been the most disrespectful chancellor I have ever served with. Been waiting a whole year to get the black faculty and myself meeting together. First, your office spent the whole time trying to separate the meeting. To this day, I would have had an easier time meeting with President Obama than you. It's taken a whole year just to sit down and discuss with you the issues on tenure of black faculty, the issues of hiring more black faculty, and the issue of more compensation, higher compensation. That's all we wanted to talk about, and it's been a whole year, and you have refused to meet with us to this date. That is unacceptable, unconscionable, and absurd. I never have experienced anything like this in any official, no matter how critical I was of the official. If you can't take criticism, then this is not the job for you, because criticism is going to come, and you don't shut down communications because you can't handle the criticism. And you still don't have no black faces up here with you, as you don't have in every time you come to a hearing.
So let me address some of the questions from Councilman Barron. First, on the BMI, I'll have a university provost give you some numbers on that. One of the additional good news is that we advocated for funding. I think for the first time, we have funding from the state to support the work of the Black Male Initiative. So that is good news. I don't know if you want to give some numbers.
We have $2.3 million in the budget for the Black Male Initiative. That's been cut by $200,000 as a result of some of the PEGs, and that has not been increased in many years. So obviously the value of that has diminished over time.
And you mentioned childcare. We're very, very happy that with funding that we got from the state, now the only of our campuses that did not have a childcare center, which was Queensboro, is going to have one. We're completing that. We put additional funding into that. Some of the funding from CUNY Reconnect has gone to provide some child support for some of those folks that were coming back, because that was an important element in the conversations that continues to increase in our campuses. I'll have the open textbook and book initiative has been really dramatic in lowering some of the costs. I don't know if you want to share some of the numbers.
Yeah, this is something we've spent a lot of time on and want to escalate because it does have such an impact for our students. In the last year, we've had over 8,000 course sections that had cost-free open access resources. 187,000 students were served for about a savings of $31 million.
Good.
Yep. And the number of Black faculty continue to increase in our campuses. Just to give you examples of recent hiring initiatives on with the funding that we received from the state.
Is that the 55 million or the 50 million?
The 53 million.
53
yes.
million.
Yeah. We have over half of all the new hires in this year. We did it in 2 years. The hires are folks of color. About 16% of those are African American faculty in the last couple of years.
What
the
percentage
number
is that?
16.
16?
16, yes.
That's all?
16% out
That's
of
kind of low.
And
see, when you say people of color, you know.
people of color were about 50%. African American was 16.
Right. So I'm just saying that we get lost in people of color.
Well, that's why I gave you the specific number, because I know that's of your particular interest. In the last couple of years, too, among the new hires that we've had, the number of African American faculty have been between 16 and 22%. So we keep increasing the number of African American faculty coming to the campus. I have the most diverse team in higher ed. If you gave me a bigger table, you'll be able to see some of the amazing African American leaders that we have in the administration.
You can't find one to come up here with you.
Well,
now?
if you give me a bigger
seat
table,
available right there.
If you give me a bigger table, we'll be
There's
able
a
to
seat
have
right
them
there.
all here. So.
And let me ask you this also: what about
Yes,
the
sir.
tenureship, the tenure track of Black faculty?
The tenure track.
Yes. How are Black faculty doing with tenure?
Well, that number right off of my head, I can give you the sense of that. We hope that in the recruitment that we able to retain that faculty. One of the initiatives that I've been in communications with the African American faculty with whom I've met, and the provost has met also with them, has been BRESI, the Black Race and Ethnic Studies Initiative, funded from the Mellon Foundation. Gave us historic funding to support Black faculty, and they've been very part of that initiative. Working on a PhD program at the Graduate Center, which has not been done, which has been a long time request of African American and ethnic faculty across the system. Funding for many programs for that faculty, research and otherwise coming out of that initiative. So we're very proud of that. I think we're meeting next week. If we had been a one-on-one meeting, it would have been easy, and I look forward to engaging
Well,
you
I
as
understand the
always.
one-on-one, but if I request a meeting with the faculty, what's the problem?
Well, I meet with them too.
No, I'm saying we wanted to meet together. And
we're going to do that next week.
I know, but why a year? Wait.
Because scheduling issues.
Oh, really? Come on now. I'm going to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge.
All right, we have Councilmember Brewer, followed by Sanchez.
Thank you very much. I want to just talk about the enrollment because I do think it's going up. And I also think you need funding in order to help it go up. So I wanted to know, it says here it's 6.6 million in order to help increase at the community colleges. But how much are you spending to increase outreach efforts? And what are you doing to help? Obviously, having ASAP, et cetera, would help.
So, we've had a comprehensive approach to our enrollment strategy, right? It goes from a larger investment, and I can get you a breakdown of what we have spent on our public relations campaign. You probably saw the ads on the subways, on TV. We also have a very strong social media component. No disrespect to people here, but that's what the students, that's where the traffic is coming. Also in ethnic and minority media, some of those ads also. The campaign with the New York City Public Schools, I think that you saw that for the month of March and April, we waived the application fee for those students in the New York State Department of Education. We knew that many students in the spring have still not applied. We're trying to encourage them to come, and I think that that paid dividends. We've also increased our outreach to the private schools in the system also. Some of the efforts with CUNY Reconnect, not only have we been using that to contact people, but what we have learned, we have shared with the campus so they can make it part of their campus culture in the outreach of the students. So we have all hands on decks reaching out. As I mentioned before, and I don't want to be overly optimistic or jinx a trend, right? But the numbers for the summer show an uptick about like 6 or 7%. And the numbers for the fall, for the first time in 2-3 years, are looking positive. So we want to continue the momentum. We want to continue letting people know that it's the right time to come to CUNY.
Give me some numbers at BMCC. What would that mean, for instance, in terms of an increase?
A projection of, I mean...
Because it was 15,000 before the pandemic.
So
or maybe 20,000, I don't know.
I mean, again, I think that we're going to get students back. I don't think we're going to immediately jump to the numbers that we had like in 2019, to give you an example. But I think for the first time, we're really, really optimistic about those trends beginning to shift.
Okay. In terms of numbers for faculty, there's always been a push for more full-time faculty at the community colleges, particularly. So what is the percentage now of full-time faculty at the community colleges?
I can get you the specific number. One of the things that we did is that we gave, when we broke down the $53 million that we got from the state on new faculty lines, we allocated that based on the needs of the campuses. So many community colleges benefited from that program. So we can give you a breakdown, for example, of how many each campus got of those lines. Happy to do that. Okay.
And then also in terms of capital, you didn't mention Gutman, North Building, et cetera. What's the status with that capital project?
We are moving along with the RFP in North Hall, so hopefully we'll be able to get that permanent home for Gutman very soon.
Okay, we want affordable housing in that building. You remember that part?
I always remember what you tell me, Councilwoman.
And the other one in terms of capital is the hole in the ground. Who's getting that money and what's going on?
The money?
Hole in the ground.
You want to? Well, so, I mean, we're still working with EDC about the Brookdale transaction. That space would be for EDC to determine how the use would be.
All right, and then I'll let you go, but one program that I do love, and I think you touched on it, is the K through 12 collaboration. Is that funded completely? Is there funding allocated to that? In other words, Hunter Science, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the schools that CUNY has relationships with on the high school level?
So far, I mean, we have not, seen of any cuts. I mean, it will depend on what the final budget, I guess, is for the Department of Education.
So if you had your druthers, what would be the amount that the community colleges, is it the 128 million or what? That's obviously the restoration. But what would be the amount that the community colleges need to be whole?
Oh my God, well, I mean, I think the first step is making sure that we don't have that peg. I mean, the peg is a huge, huge burden. Remember, the enrollment loss meant about 130 million of revenue loss in the community college, and that's besides the peg. That's just money that they did not earn. So we need every penny to be able to support the students that attend community colleges.
All right, so 130 plus. Thank you.
Councilmember Sanchez, followed by Williams.
Thank you, chairs, and good afternoon, Chancellor and all. I don't even know where to start, but I'll start with your testimony. Half of undergraduate students come from households with incomes less than $30,000 per year, 45% first in their family to attend college, 50% working while going to school. 80% of your graduates stay in New York City. Half of all New York City nurses every single year come from CUNY. I mean, the impact cannot be understated, but I will ask this in form of a yes, no. Is CUNY an engine of economic opportunity for the city of New York?
Absolutely.
And then you mentioned in your testimony, $60 million in investments in CUNY can result in $900 million of output. Can you describe some of that methodology? Is that also including not just the students, but how your institutions are anchors within our community?
Well, I mean, most of that comes, I mean, that doesn't factor the role of our campuses as anchor institutions. That would add dollars there. That is based on how much money those students will earn based on their degrees, and also how much less they will cost the city in terms of using social services and things like that. So it's a savings on that front in addition to the additional revenue that they make and the taxes they will pay based on the jobs they will get.
Absolutely, and I would also add, there's impacts to the nature, just having the institutions across the city of New York. I have a tia, an aunt who was a janitor at Bronx Community College for 30 years, and because she was a janitor at Bronx Community College, one day she ran into the dean of the community college, and asked them why were there high school students in the school, in one of the buildings, and that is how we learned about Upward Bound program 25 years ago. All of my cousins did it. I did it. I graduated from Upward Bound, went to Harvard, went to Princeton. There are spillover effects that happen because these institutions are hiring in our communities, are there locally, and just want to, restate my recommitment that, I will work with my colleagues to ensure that these cuts are not happening. And so the last question is ASAP, ACE, Reconnect, these programs that are helping communities like mine. I represent Bronx Community College, and Lehman College is right across the street in Councilmember Dinowitz's district. But tell us about the profile of these students. What does it mean for ACE to be cut?
Well, I mean, all those programs, ASAP has been proven to be, one of the most effective nationally recognized programs in getting community college students to complete on time, right? Which is our first layer of support for the students that come to CUNY. It is an incentive. It helps us to recruit, right? Because the students get additional benefits. It's not just coming and financial aid. It's getting additional things, an additional community of support, additional services. So it's a huge recruitment tool for the 2-year schools, and then for the 4-year school for those kids to transfer. We get money from private donors to get those students to transfer. So there's such a huge loss. ACE is a scaled-up version of that program for the 4-year schools that we're piloting. So again, massive losses in human capital, massive losses in opportunity and hope for the city.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. And reiterating what Councilmember Barron said, we're going to fight against cuts, but we also absolutely need to protect the students from not seeing tuition increases. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
And let the record state that we did not include a tuition increase in our budget request. So just to dispel any rumors that is on the table.
Thank you.
Okay, we Councilmember Williams, followed by Velasquez.
Thank you. I actually had a follow-up question to what Councilmember Barron said. Do you have a number of the Black faculty through the system? Do you know how many Black faculty are on staff? While you look for that,
yes, well,
go ahead. Yeah, I'll just go through all my questions. So I would love to know what you're doing on the workforce front and what budget allocations exist there. As you know, there are tons of industries, and New Yorkers are just not prepared to get opportunities within those industries. I want to talk about your college. It's my understanding that your college has not been prioritized in capital funds. There was $71 million that apparently is in a CUNY account to build a new facility that they've wanted to build.
You said York?
York College, yep. So they currently have $71 million. I know they're asking for, give me a second, $300 million more dollars. I know in the state budget, you all were awarded $435 million in flexible capital funding for a total of $1.1 billion for capital funds. So I just want to know, why is York College not prioritized, and if York College can be prioritized in your capital budget? And last but certainly not least, as a current doctoral student, really interested in the resources and support you have for doctoral students. It's really hard to be a doctoral student and sometimes work. So students may not be able to work and want to complete their degrees, but there are not a lot of resources. I'm thankful that I was a part of a fellowship when I originally started matriculating, and now recently was awarded a Humanities Fellow opportunity, but a lot of students struggle to get money to complete their doctoral studies at CUNY.
So let me allow Provost Hensel to give you the breakdown on the African American faculty, and then I'll take a stab at some of your other questions.
Hi, so university-wide, there's 864 faculty members who are Black. That's 12.3%. And just to put into context some of the earlier comments about the hiring, the progress in hiring, the recent faculty that we hired last year, 15.3% were Black. So making progress.
And the year before 22. So each of the most recent hires are a lot more diverse than the whole body of our faculty that has been there for a long time and will take some time to change. A couple of things. Fully with you on the doctoral support. We lobby very hard the state for $7 million so that we can increase the stipends for the doctoral students. Anybody in Albany will tell you that I was championing that because I concur with you that we need to increase those stipends to be more competitive. The state gave us 3, so we hope to be able to make up the difference somewhat. We have prioritized York College for capital funding. We can send you a list of all the projects that we have done there. From the performing arts centers to science centers. I mean, we can.
Yeah, and no, and a lot of that money was allocated by way of the council, but not the overall pot of money that CUNY is sitting on. So this is specific to the York College Academic Village and Conference Center specifically is what I'm talking about.
And that building we prioritize among the 3 items that we asked the state to fund this year. Now when we get the complete allocation, we're making decisions on that, and we've been supporting York on that project since the beginning.
So just to clarify, you are prioritizing it this year because last year was not prioritized. You all prioritized Hunter College.
It was on the building. Let's talk about it. That building has been on our priority list for the last 2 years, right? And we've been adding capital to that. What I mentioned was other projects that we can tell you that we've been investing in York too.
No, I'm aware of the current projects that are there, but I'm also aware that this project has been a priority for both state members that represent the college and council members, and it is my understanding that CUNY in the past has not prioritized funding for this particular project, even though you all continue to receive capital funding from the state and have a whole bucket of money, and there's current allocations to the project, but they have not been able to have their full amount to actually begin the project.
So 2 things. This has been just the past 2 years that we've gotten funding for new capital, right? We have not allocated the pot that's just been awarded 2 weeks ago, right? So we're making decisions about that. I've been fully supportive of the York project. We take a look at all the bucket, but we have not been receiving capital for many, many years in a row, so just the last 2 years. So York, it is one of our priorities, and we have to look at where we end this year to hopefully see if we can complete that project.
And just chairs, just a comment, the Equal Employment Practices Commission that was just here for their budget hearing actually submitted a report on the underutilization at CUNY community colleges around racial and ethnic groups. And so just wondering if you were able to address some of their recommendations to address the underutilization in employees at CUNY community colleges. And just so you know the percentages, Asians actually were the most underutilized with 39% of job groups, then Blacks 19%, and then Hispanics, well actually Hispanics at 25%, then Blacks at 19%, and then women overall at 27%. So were you able to address the recommendations from EEPC?
So we'll be happy to share with you the response to the report, some of the work that we've been doing, some of those categories, some of those things can be very specific. For example, in the issue of Asians, for example, the numbers are skewed in part because of the 2 community colleges in the Bronx, but more than happy to engage you with the recommendations. We take that very seriously, and we work very hard with the leadership in each of the schools so they can advance that. We need to be able to have the resources to hire the people to deal with those numbers.
Okay, thank you. Underscoring the importance of EEPC in this year's budget because they do amazing work. Thank you.
Councilmember Velasquez, followed by Joseph.
Hi there. I'll have a mixed bag of questions for you. First of all, as you can see, I have a lot of snacks here, part of the snacks caucus, because, you know, it's long days with the hearings, but it brings up the point of hunger in your students. And so one of the questions I have today is, how are you addressing that within your students?
So through a whole range of ways. One of the first things that I did when I became chancellor was to ask, and it's in the budget request, $1 million that the council is providing to support students that have food insecurity. So we've been tackling that since the beginning. A second thing that we did, and this is a recommendation that came from student government, was that we open our pantries to students from all the system. Before, when I became chancellor, you had to be a Baruch student to go to the Baruch pantry, right? Student government said they should be open to everybody. It made sense, and we opened them, and it was incredibly helpful during the pandemic. We're looking to partner with some of the organizations. For example, I am a believer, too, that the pantry is an important thing on the campus. It might not be the most convenient thing for the students. So we need to partner with the neighborhoods where the students live, with the resources that they have there. The other part, and we could really use the council's support here, is that it is challenging to operate the cafeterias on our campuses. They don't have the volume that some of the vendors need. I mean, and I know that from having been president in a small campus in the Bronx. And the pandemic threw the food business into a spiral. We actually had a contract to get a vendor for the entire system that went kaput as a result of the pandemic. So right now, many operators do not find that they make revenue by serving our students, which means that either we will have to subsidize the food there or find other solutions. So we'll be delighted to sit with you and others to think about this, because this is an important issue that we're going to need your support. And the pandemic really threw a monkey wrench in our capacity to bring some of the companies that operate the cafeterias.
I'm looking forward to that, and let's set that up right away. Yep. Other questions, will CUNY ensure that tuition for out-of-state students is not increased in order to honor its goal of serving students regardless of race, gender, and immigration status?
That's when we make the final budget decision at the end of this year, we'll make determinations about out-of-state tuition.
Okay, and then finally, in what ways can you provide the ASAP program to be expanded to the senior colleges whose students are in desperate need of support?
Well, ACE is an attempt to use the lessons learned from ASAP and take it to the 4-year. I mean, it was a program that was piloted at Lehman and John Jay and then expanded. So cutting ACE would not allow us to continue seeing if we get those results.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Joseph, followed by Farias.
Thank you, chairs. Hi, Chancellor.
Great
nice
to see
you. Same here. I want to say I'm glad to see you, and I realize there's a visible partnership between DOE and CUNY. So inside higher ed, recently you had a partnership. So what are the recruitment strategies CUNY have in work to recruit students at New York City Public Schools?
So we're doing a whole range of them, and I'll have, if I forget some, I'll have my university provost sort of remind. But for example, we just announced a couple of days ago, beginning this fall, every senior in the New York City Public Schools is going to get a letter from us saying, we're ready to welcome you at CUNY. These are the schools you can apply to. This is the way to do it. It's going to have a barcode that's going to make it easier for you to apply. Moving forward, we hope to be able to build on that to continue to make it easy for the students to apply. What that will do also is allow us to engage with them and their families earlier, right, as opposed to waiting until October, November, December, when people start going crazy with some of the applications. I'm really excited about that capacity to engage with them earlier. We're working on an app for counselors so they can have access to real-time information. We have that on our sort of procurement conga line to be able to secure that and get it for the students. So we're trying to build on that partnership more and more. More work with the early colleges, which are direct pipelines of recruiting. I know that you're a big advocate of those programs. Anything else?
We're working to simplify financial aid to make sure that that award gets done almost instantaneously, because the love they're getting from some private schools of $10,000, even though it's a $50,000 bill, is leading to some poor choices. Also, I just wanted to point out one program we haven't talked about that did get cut, that's exactly in line with what you're asking, and that's College Explorers, which takes 10th graders to college campuses at CUNY to introduce them to college campuses, and that's been reduced by 1.5 million. And so instead of 35,000 students who get to visit a college, it's now down to 20.
That's a shame. Some of the proven work, thank you for that, so we'll keep that in the back of our mind. Some of your programs that have worked, and I've watched CUNY Fatherhood Academy. It's a program that serves ages 18 to 30 through education, employment, personal development, and all of the support, including GED prep, tutoring, and what's marketing effort do you use to spread the word? This is such a great program, and I think it goes unnoticed, and no one knows about this amazing program. So what are you doing to amplify this program?
I mean, I think there's one of the challenges that is not available to all the campuses, right? So I think in the campuses where you have them, people do know about them because it's such a transformational experience for the students who participate. If we had additional funding, right, we could do more. I do think that they're fairly well known, but not system-wide, but in the campuses where they are.
Thank you. And one last question. Thank you, Chair, with your permission. How are you caring for students that have been through foster care in the CUNY system? In New York City Public Schools, we have an office that handles them now, but we want to know, how is CUNY handling students that come through care?
So, I mean, we have a number of partnership programs. One that ended was we had a program with students that used to be housed at Queens College in their dorms, and I think at City College dorms, if memory serves me right, with funding from ACS to be able to support them. There's a program also that the mayor began that provides funding for the students to attend not just to CUNY but to other schools. The majority of the students who are part of that program are with us in New York. And again, this is a population that if we can do more for them, open to your suggestions, because we know that they have some of the worst, unfortunately, educational outcomes because they've been scarred by, domestic violence, by physical violence, by poverty, all those things. So happy to be supportive in working with you to find additional support systems for them.
Absolutely. I just want to know, in terms of when you do have students that come from that, do you provide tutoring? Do you provide coaching? Do you provide job training? We see the outcome. We saw the statistics, usually justice involved, usually suspension rate, even in middle school, elementary level, and all of that.
So let me get back to you, because the program that I'm more familiar with was the residential program, and that changed in terms of it's a partnership with ACS. I wouldn't want to mislead you, so let me get you the right information on that.
Yeah, not on the record. Thank you, Chancellor.
Thank you. Councilmember Farias, followed by Stevens.
Thanks, chairs. Thank you, folks, for coming in to testify today. I'm going to try to go through the questions really quickly with my limited time. As a member of the Black, Latino, Asian caucus here in the council, I'm vested in, our retention of Black professors and tenured professors. I'd also like to hear the numbers for Latino, Hispanic professors and Asian professors, if you folks have that. And if you don't have it here today, you can give it to us.
We have it.
Okay, great. And while we're waiting on those numbers, for the technical education on campuses, how are we seeing these programs' success or challenges with some of the cuts that are being called for? Are we seeing any declines in enrollment? What are we doing for the process of going into the workforce, and do those numbers of successes in our either college to career or our technical vocational trade programs, are we counting those numbers? And I know they're not graduation numbers, but are we counting them towards the success metrics for each of the campuses?
So let me, while the provost gathers the data on the groups. Sure. Workforce and career has been one of the things that we've invested the more since I became chancellor, right? Because we feel that is one missing component of the great education that the students got and the accessibility that we had. In that sense, very, very thankful to the mayor for baselining the inclusive economy. I mean, that is a way to build capacity in each campus on career services, grow the number of internships. I mean, that hole is destined to that entire arena there. The mayor's office also added about $8 million in paid internships for many of our students, Spring Forward. So it's been a sizable investment, and we want to do more on the front of careers. We just, I mean, this, to give you an example, 2 weeks ago, I announced we began a program that was since last summer with the MTA, 150 paid internships. We had 16,000 students apply to that. Right? I was in Mount Sinai in a program that gets funded by the state, again, paid internships for students in public health. I visited with the president of LaGuardia Boys Technologies, a manufacturing company in Long Island City. So we've been pushing, and the industry is ready for talent. Absolutely. We've just been saying, come and hire students for paid and hire them for full-time jobs. And I think that, did that buy enough time to get the data? Yes.
It did. Thank you. Yes, so across, looking at tenure track and non-tenure track faculty together, the total of folks of color is 38.6%. Broken down, that's 10.5% Hispanic, 12.5% Black, 14.5% Asian. And to give you some context, the national benchmark for Black faculty is 6%. It's an area that needs a great deal of improvement across the board.
Great, thank you for that. Chairs, if I may, 2 more things. Thank you, and I just want to say we should touch offline on some of these internships to municipal work and maybe some of the complications. The council itself and myself personally have been working on the civil service exam backlog and whatnot, so we should continue the conversation there.
Absolutely.
And then in terms of, I see pegs on vacancies. Do we know, I see the civilian and pedagogical, the civilian track, what were those titles in charge of and what services are now not going to be happen for? And do we know how long the vacancies
Well, I mean,
were
we
open?
can give you a breakdown on some of those things, but again, people talk about vacancies. Those are, less counselors, less librarians, less of the people providing services,
Sure.
right? This is the things that then.
So the civilian posts are library, like librarians, for example, or counselors, for example?
No.
That's what I'm asking.
So what would, a couple examples of things that would be considered in the civilian post are, custodians,
my bad, yes.
facilities,
Okay.
Security, things like that.
Okay.
But, kind of back to, I don't know if you're beginning, we've also lost all those positions that the chancellor has talked about because of the tuition and plus the pegs. So this is just the last round.
Yeah, and just my last question, and it can be yes or no, or you can answer it how you feel. I see through your testimony, ASAP is being impacted, tutoring, proficiency assistance, staff reductions, capacity and ability in some of our campuses, services, maintenance, public safety, professional development. Would you say that these cuts are going to directly impact services?
See.
Thank you.
Councilmember Powers.
You skipped me. Good afternoon.
Sorry,
I'm Councilmember Stevens.
Councilmember Stevens.
And I'm jumping in because I got to go. It's all good, no worries. Just a couple of things. One, I just wanted to start off by saying that I'm a CUNY family. Mother, sister, daughter, and myself all graduated from CUNY. But also wanted to just emphasize the importance of ASAP. My daughter definitely was an ASAP student. I worked in youth development for 20 years, and ASAP literally was the reason why a lot of my students was able to actually complete school. And so it's disheartening to see that this is something that's on the chopping block that could be cut, when the reality is this should be expanded and offered to every student that's entering any 2-year institution. And so just want to be associated with some of Councilmember Barron's comments that we shouldn't be fighting to put back cuts. We should be fighting for enhancements at this point, because this is a evidence-based program that we have the evidence that shows that this actually helps students graduate in an efficient time. And so just wanted to be associated with that. Councilmember Farah has already kind of started to ask these questions, but I wanted to talk a little bit about workforce development and what does that look like, because in this city we have a huge crisis around finding folks for these jobs, but we also have a huge unemployment rate. And so for me, it's like, how are we connecting the dots? So could you talk a little bit about what your partnership looks like with New York City around getting CUNY students into these jobs? In addition, what does your partnerships also look like with nonprofits, which is another sector that is struggling to get young people into these jobs, and then how can we work together?
So thank you for that, and I'll be happy also to, offline. So we have a number of programs, for example, that provide paid internships and connections to small businesses and nonprofits, because we realize that those are big parts of our economy, right? And they seldom get less attention than a partnership with larger companies, right, do. And we have a number of programs, and we've targeted some of the funding at the city level and from the state level just for partnership with small businesses and nonprofits. The Brooklyn Recovery Course program that I mentioned in my testimony is a program that is destined just to work with that sector in particularly central Brooklyn, to give you an example of one of those things. On the larger employer side, we began the partnership with the New York City Jobs CEO Council, some of the 30 largest companies in New York. They've been helping us to upgrade curriculum, to look at our offerings, to create certificates and programs, and to create pipelines for internships and apprenticeships built into the program. So I think that this is one of the areas in which we have made the most significant progress, even with the pandemic. The response from the employers has been incredible for our talent, and we want to continue building on that with your support.
Absolutely, thank you. And just want to say that definitely we want to connect offline. I know we have a small business initiative, small pilot program that we're working on, but also want to think about how can we do this very similar thing with the nonprofit sector. It's a sector that is hurting. They cannot find staff, and a lot of the young people who are in CUNY can actually be working there part-time, and those dots are not being connected in a real way. So definitely want to continue to work and have that conversation about making sure that industry has young people. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, now we have Councilman Powers.
Thank you. Nice to see you guys. I'm sorry I missed your testimony, but I was watching online, and nice to see you guys. I have a lot of questions. I want to talk about Brookdale, which is obviously a big project that's coming ahead, but I want to start just by and I know you share this, my deep concern about proposed cuts to CUNY, which is, I am a CUNY graduate, just like many others here, but you don't have to be a CUNY graduate to understand how important it is as an economic engine and opportunity to the city, to the state, and for a lot of students, it's an affordable way to get the higher education they need to succeed in this world. And still, a lot of correlation between degree and job, and we have an opportunity here to fund a institution and a series of institutions that provide that opportunity, whether it's a 2-year, 4-year degree or a graduate degree like I got. And so I just hope all my colleagues will be joining all of us who have been saying this. I know you agree, so I'm preaching to the choir, but we have to be vigilant in our pursuit of making sure that CUNY gets the funding that deserves, not just the cuts, but the funding that deserves. And I will say that our budget response, 36.9 requested for CUNY to restore cuts, only $1 million in there. 5.8 for CUNY Reconnect, 5.8's in there. 10.5 to accelerate, compete, and engage program at CUNY. We asked for 10.5, 0. Provide additional CUNY academic advisors. We asked for 5.5. Executive budget 1.9, so we're at 10% of what we asked for, and I think our asks are fairly reasonable. So would ask folks to stay on message here when it comes to that. Now I will talk about Brookdale. I want to make sure I talk about how important CUNY is, because it's important. We say that often. Obviously, a project you guys have talked about, and it's being talked about in the capital program here, is the Brookdale campus, which I think we're all excited about. An opportunity to spur major growth in life sciences. Have CUNY be connected to that, have our public high schools connected to that. Excellent opportunity here for the city, and proud it's in my district. But I just want to get some details on the record here. Just one is timeline and where we are in the process. 2 is construction, what happens to different institutions that are there, or one institution, but what happens to different programs that are there in the middle of that. 3 is, do we have an understanding how many students might be served by that, CUNY students? And 4th is, we're doing a lot of resiliency work in that area, and want to know, and Bellevue has a resiliency program going up to Langone, so how you guys will plug into that, and the larger East Side Coastal Resiliency program going on there. Those are 4 questions.
Let me yield the floor to our COO, who's the person who's directly working on that project. I think he can answer those 4 and many more.
Thank you, Councilman, for that question. First of all, thank you for all your support. As we recently met and sort of discussed this very important project for CUNY, a couple of things. Number one is, as you know, EDC has retained Skidmore to do, and we're right now in the phases of sort of doing the analysis of the space planning. As part of that phasing plan, we're looking to see our goal, and it's been our position, that we want as less interruption as possible to our academic structure. I mean, as I mentioned to you in our meeting the other day, the good thing about this project for CUNY is we're not part of a land use review process. Our project is as of right, and because of that, we've told EDC that as they're analyzing this project, moving this project forward, that take into consideration how we structure, how we move, how we stack it, to make sure that there's less interruption as possible to the project. With regards to resiliency, they've hired a firm to sort of look at the impact of that project and how, when we build a project, it has as less effect on the community and on this project going forward. So we think we are in good shape. With regards to the timeline, we're right now finishing the analysis with the consultant. We have to now do an EIS and a ULUP process for the second phase of the project. We are expecting to, by the time that we sort of have that analysis, to be able to have a timeline that we could share with you, as I mentioned to you in that meeting. A couple of moving parts, but both the governor and the mayor, when they announced the project, stated to EDC and to all of us the importance of getting this project done on time.
Just one follow-up question. When you say it's as of right, you're talking about the CUNY component to that, but the larger project, as I understand it, needs a ULURP.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
And the last thing I'd say is, and I just permission from the chair to have 10 more seconds to just, I just want to say this on the record, and I've said it to you guys privately, but I want to be public about it. Student housing really is important, and that has been the housing for many students. Hunter, my mom was one of them, and really important, essential that students have an opportunity to have a place to live, especially in the core of Manhattan. So I really hope we can get to a place where that is included in this final project.
So, Councilman, thank you. It's been a priority for the chancellor. He's charged me with, we're doing a couple of things. Number one, system-wide, we have about 2,800 dorms system-wide, and about seven dorms that 3 we own, that we control. So we're in the process of coming up with a short-term and a long-term solution. So the short-term is that we're looking at our existing infrastructure to make sure that we come up with a solution to deal with the affordability issue. So you know the students that are in the dorms at Brookdale, the chancellor has guaranteed that we will make sure that those students will not be affected economically and otherwise. Long term, we're bringing in a consultant to look at CUNY and to understand what the needs are, and I think they're going to look at the market conditions and affordability across the system, and we'll be able to present that analysis to the chancellor, and then we'll be able to begin to make some decisions.
Just one last question on the housing question. Mm-hmm. The mayor has asked every city agency to take an evaluation to look at housing for the asylum seekers, and that's where the police academy down the block for me is currently a short-term holding spot for some folks. Has CUNY been asked to identify, and have you identified any places where even during the summer you might be home for asylum seekers?
We're providing that information to both the city and the state.
And you have provided it? Are there?
Well, I mean, we're providing information that they're asked for different kinds of sites, and we did an inventory and we share that with them.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I just want to thank all my colleagues and CUNY for testifying today. I think it's very clear. The cuts are devastating. All the programs that our students here in New York City rely on for the social and economic mobility are set to be cut. and it's really going to make it much more challenging, more challenging than it already is for our youth, to do better for themselves, do better for their families, and their families are able to do for them. These cuts are just devastating, and I appreciate your testimony today to highlight how devastating these cuts are.
Thank you all so much. We look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, today's executive budget hearings are adjourned.